Anyway, all right, guys, welcome to Extended Range and Decompression Procedures. We're going to be going through both at the same time. We have some people that are one person joining us just for the deco procedures portion of it. The rest of you guys are Extended Range. Now, to kind of clarify, with Extended Range nitrox is before Extended Range, but if I magically decree and feel you to be worthy, you can skip Extended Range nitrox and you can go straight to Extended Range. The course is basically the same. Extended Range just is in more depth and has 2 extra dives. So that's what we're going to be working on tonight. My qualifications to be able to teach this: I'm obviously a decompression diver, decompression chamber procedures diver, Extended Range instructor, and dive master. Well, I'm no longer a dive master instructor, but I'll delete that. It's been a couple weeks since I've taught this. So overall, so what we're going to do is assign out a few subjects. I'm going to skip that tonight because you guys have already done that for my other class. And honestly, the other class is really this class just minus a few things. So we'll skip that and let's get straight into it. Let me remove that and get back. I'm going to skip because we've already gone that. And we're going to jump right into the meat and the potatoes of this as well, because we're going over most of the other stuff in science of diving. So overall, excuse me, we're going to cover the ideas of the saturation desaturation model. We're going to talk about the roles of the dive tables and computers and the mathematical volume models. We'll talk about half-time concepts, saturation model diagram, and we're going to talk about compartment saturation times. Now, hopefully that doesn't sound too scary, because it's really not. It's all basic stuff. The proof is in the pudding when we do technical diving, and when it comes down to the actual dive and being able to handle the skills. The math and the rest of it is pretty straightforward. It's definitely not rocket science overall. So the first thing we want to look at is going to be the saturation model. Now, overall, Bullman came up with the idea that there are 16 theoretical compartments that we deal with when it comes to saturation in our body overall, and they're broken down from fast tissue to slow tissue. And while I get that doesn't sound like too big a rocket science idea, the idea of how these tissue compartments absorb nitrogen and off-gas nitrogen, or profuse and diffuse, as our magic terms for the night, is a key to understanding what's going on. So our fast tissue are things like our brain stem, right? Our brain, the circle of Willis. The idea is where oxygen will go to the quickest. They're going to be our cerebral things like that, and the beginning of the nerve points. Our slow tissue are going to be exactly what you might think. Chase, what do you think would be one of the slow tissue compartments? Where would nitrogen have the hardest time absorbing into?
Maybe the intercostal space between joints.
That's a good thought. It's not where we're looking for.
Or teeth.
Say again.
Teeth.
I'm not sure what the absorption factor is on teeth. To be honest with you,
slow.
Muscles is a slower. The slowest of them is our fat. Muscles are slower. And they're in there, but so whoever said muscles, they're on the right track. They are fat. So, as we start looking at it, we need to realize what's fast and what's a slow tissue overall. And overall, there's 16 of these compartments that absorb and they profuse and diffuse nitrogen across the process. So Bullman in the 50s came up with this mathematical model, and he said, I theorize that there is 16 different compartments. And he came up with a really cool mathematical formula. It looks something like this. This may or may not be I'm just kidding. It's the actual Bullman working model. And so over time, he finally published in the mid 60s his first idea with Workman. And then finally he came up with the ZHL M value system in 83. That was when ZHL Hotel Lima finally came out with the first idea. And he theorized that there were 16 tissue compartments. As time went by, he modified this, And we're currently on, anybody know what version of the Bowman 16, L16 compartment we're on?
Charlie.
We're on Charlie. Charlie is the latest version of it. So kind of cool with this chart is we're able to look at and see the saturation models between A, B, and C. And you can see overall that he really got the idea that we didn't need to make a lot of changes. And you see they're pretty consistent across from the alpha to beta to the Charlie version. And you can start getting the idea that what happened with this. And it's not until we finally get into the mid values that we start seeing a change. We see about a 2% change at the mid value, and then a 3% change, and then we go back to a 3% change, 2% change, a 1% change overall. So we go from our slowest tissues to our fastest tissues. And what he theorized is that as each one of these tissues absorbs the nitrogen, this is about the pace at the slope it's going to take to do that. And he's also got depths on here as well. So overall, it gives us the idea that at 106 feet seawater, our slowest tissue compartment starts absorbing at the most. And then finally, our fastest tissue compartment is already absorbed and it's already absorbing. So as we kind of look at this, it's kind of interesting to kind of think about this. Anybody ever heard of pile stops or deep stops?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me what you know about pile stops, Chase.
Is it the same thing as deep stops?
A roundabout, yeah.
So I know that deep stops, the idea was essentially doing a deep stop was a way to off gas some of those harder, slower compartments, I thought. But I thought that recent studies by the Navy came out and have started showing that deep stops present greater risk than benefit.
They do, and it's the interesting thing is as you start looking at this chart in the Delta or in the Charlie version, you start getting the idea that if we come up and we're doing a recreational 120-foot dive, Pyle says that at 60 feet, we need to do a stop and do a 2 to 3 minute safety deep safety stop. Now, the interesting thing is, as we look at this, what's happening to our slow tissue? Tissue compartment 5, 4, 3, 2, 1B, and 1. Are they off gassing or on gassing?
They're still on gassing, right?
Absolutely. So even if we did what Pyle says, so if we did 130 feet, that's what's 130? That's 65 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're doing if we're at 65 feet, we're still on gassing all of our key tissue compartments, and we're actually pushing what's called our lead tissue compartment forward faster than we are pulling it back. Now, where deep stops come in play is when we start figuring out and saying, okay, wait a minute. As we look at this, we need to have been down longer and allowed ourselves more of our tissue compartments to get to what's considered an M value. Now, anybody understand, have heard that term before, M value?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So M value is like this, right? A lot of times I have a balloon, but if we had a balloon and we blow it up, there's a point with that balloon as we blow it up that is 100%. That if we go 1% more, it blows up, right? You know, catch that kind of that analogy so far?
Yep.
Now, in playing with balloons, we have discovered over the course of time, to kind of put a finer point on this analogy, that some balloons are, we'll say, 100 cubic centimeters of air, but some balloons 101 or 102 or 103. They get a little bit bigger before they pop, right? Does that make sense? Now that's kind of how our bodies are as well. Chase, how your body hits M value on any particular tissue compartment is going to be different than my M value. Mm-hmm. David, yours is going to be different than both of ours combined. Mine could be completely unique all to itself. That M value per person is going to be unique. And to further complicate the issue, my M value on tissue compartment number 16 has a high likelihood of being different today as it would be tomorrow. And that could be dependent upon sleep. It can be dependent upon whether I drank Gatorade that day, if I had alcohol, if I was particularly tired, or I did a tremendous amount of diving the week before, if the atmospheric pressure was different. There's a lot of factors that actually go into the idea of where that M value of 100% actually is. So what we did is we separated it out, and they made a theoretical M value line per tissue compartment. And what they did is they sunk that down a little bit, and they said, okay, we're going to take this based upon 100 well-fit scuba divers from the Navy. And now we're going to say, wait a minute, we need to make sure that we add a safety margin in. So what they did is they built a specific safety margin in on top of that as well. And so they said, okay, M value perfect is this. This is where M value should be. And by doing that, what they started doing and understanding and building M value based upon 16 tissue compartments is the amount of issues that NITO had, Naval Experimental Diving Unit, and Scripps Institute started noticing over the course of time began to reduce dramatically, not just a little bit, but dramatically over the course of time. And so by figuring this out, they would say, wait a minute, this is a good idea. Well, they went ahead and they did a little bit, they went a little bit farther, and we're going to briefly touch on this just for a moment. And they said, wait, what can we do for the recreational technical diver, the guy that's not working for the Navy or Scripps Institute or NITO? And what can we do to help them increase their safety margin based upon them? Excuse me. So what they did is they said, let's add a gradient factor to that. And so what we're doing with a gradient factor is it's giving us the opportunity to set a additional safety margin on top of what we already have. So if we know that our gradient factor is, or our value for tissue compartment 16 is 100 cubic centimeters, everything after 100 cubic centimeters, poof, it pops, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm using that. It's not measured that way in the cell tissue, obviously, but I'm just trying to put a numeric value on it to visualize it for you. So if we have 100 cubic centimeters and we know 101 is bad, what can we do to make sure that divers aren't taking themselves to all the way to that point every single time? Because we know that that's a floating value. Some days it's going to be 98. Some days it's going to be 102, but it could be at 95. So how do we add an additional safety factor to that? We add what's called a gradient factor. And so the first part of the gradient factor is actually the second number. And that number is a very important number. So we have two parts of a gradient factor. We have the first number, which is the gradient factor low, and the second one is the gradient factor high. The second number is by far the most important number. So what we do is we say, hey, 100 cubic centimeters is my perceived, my theoretical M value. I'm going to go ahead and put a gradient factor high on that of 80%. I'm going to set my computer so that my gradient factor never comes closer than 80% of the total maximum available volume. Does that track?
And that's for you on the surface, right? That's
I can't surface.
You should not
until I'm 80% or below of the total M value on all my tissue compartments.
Now, that being said, the gradient factor low is still very important, because last place you want to have an issue is
gradient factor low is important, but the more important of the two numbers is gradient factor high, because it is the final point that says you are worthy to exit the water.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. We got to figure out how to turn that crap off, because that's going to annoy me. So we've got so gradient factor high is the most important of the two numbers, because it's the one that says I've gotten to my deco stop, and now I'm clear to go ahead and ascend to the surface. That's the most important factor. Honestly, you can set the gradient factor low and the gradient factor high to the same number. Now, you definitely increase your chances of getting DCS by doing that, because you're blowing your balloon up too quickly, if you will. So you're blowing that balloon up to 100% and then bringing it down. So what gradient factor low, the first number does, it allows you to approach the gradient factor high at a slower rate. by putting a differentiation. Go ahead.
Why is the gradient factor low typically set to such a more conservative value than the high value?
Absolutely, and that's what I was just saying. The gradient factor low, it gives you a differential between the low and the high to allow you to approach the high factor at a slower rate.
Okay.
So instead of just popping up and saying, okay, we're going to blow this balloon up, and then we're going to let it deflate slowly. Okay. Instead, we blow the balloon up slowly to that point, and then we allow it to slowly deflate. Yeah. So we're not stressing the tension of the cell or the tissue compartment, and that's our key. Is we're reducing the tension of the tissue compartment dramatically by allowing it to slowly get to that point. So gradient factor low, what it does is it sets the depth of the first stop.
Okay.
So, for example, a typical gradient factor in real-world diving is going to be 50, 80, or 50, 85, which means that as I start to rise in the water column, when my tissue compartment, and most importantly, my lead tissue compartment, and what that means is the one that has the greatest amount of saturation at that point and is closing in value the highest, it becomes the controlling factor. It's kind of like you and your wife. Your wife will always be the controlling factor in the marriage, right? Because she is the closest to getting mad and killing you, right? The kids, you bury them in the backyard, but the wife is always the closest one to hacking you up in the middle of the night while you're asleep. So gradient factor low is like your wife. It controls everything at the beginning of how we get there. So as we control that factor getting there, let's see. Okay, good. As it controls us getting there. And so it's based upon our lead tissue compartment. Out of those 16, whichever one has the closest to 50% of the total M value is going to be the one that's going to control and stop. And so as we come up with the water column, that'll be our ceiling. And our gradient factor low controls the idea of where our first deco stop will be.
Okay. Ben, I think you have a few comments.
Say again?
I think you have a few comments in the chat.
I was just putting in some questions in there just because I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, sure. As we go along, you're welcome to ask questions.
I guess we should probably ask them out loud for the sake of the video, but.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we're absolutely going to get into these questions. Absolutely. And I do have recommendations, and we'll talk about that as well. But I want to understand the dynamic of it first, and I was actually going to cover these. So the idea is as we get to that first gradient factor, so we say it's 50% in our case, right? What's going to happen is when we rise to the point where and the computer can absolutely make a judgment call and say, okay, I know that if we're at 150 feet, for example, I know that based upon the time and the gas that we're currently diving, that if this diver rises to 75 feet, they're going to hit their gradient factor low, their first point, and they'll hit 50% on this particular tissue compartment. The computer can absolutely make a judgment call. It actually knows if I rose to the surface right now, it actually knows what your lead tissue compartment percentage would be. That's one of the cool things with the Perdix is that it actually has a setting for gradient factor surface, which it'll tell you that no matter what depth I'm at, if I rise to the surface right now, my gradient factor will be whatever. And it's not uncommon. I've seen on dives where I was building up 25, 30, 35, 40 minutes of deco for that gradient factor surface to be at the 130, 140, 150, 150%. So I know for a fact if my gradient factor surface is 150% and I come straight to the surface right now, I know for a fact I'm going to get DCS. It's not a question of if.
Yeah, based off the M value.
It's a question of how bad is it going to be, right? And how far away is my actual M value, which is a theory that unknowable line. So it's going to go ahead.
The computer's also going to track as you switch between your different gas mixtures. It's going to track how that's affecting your onboarding and offboarding, your on gassing and off gassing, right?
It tracks everything. And in a lot of cases, if you have a different gas programmed in, it'll also make suggestions for you at the correct time for you to switch over to that correct gas. For example, the DSX, the Apex, it will come up with a bar that says a more appropriate gas. Do you want to switch gas? And you push one button, it switches over to the more appropriate gas.
Okay.
And it turns your gases yellow instead of the normal color. So it lets you know. Same thing with the Garmin, or not the Garmin, but the Perdix. It flashes over to yellow. It changes your current gas to yellow to let you know there's a better gas programmed in. You should probably switch. So it'll give you notifications. Other cool things about your computers is it monitors all 16 of those compartments simultaneously, and it knows where you are at in that dive at any given time. It's one of the reasons I do like the Perdix as well, is that you can switch over and you actually see a bar graph with all 16 lines, and it'll give you an idea where your tissue compartments are and what the lead tissue compartment is, and it goes from green to yellow to red. So it's kind of a cool thing that I like about that as well.
DSX
the DSX gives you a tissue compartment guide as well. So it's kind of nice. So as we go through this process, in the past, the gradient factor suggestion was to be conservative, to do like a 30-70 or a 30-60, right? And that was very, very conservative. And if you want to be a little bit more aggressive, maybe you go to a 30-70 or maybe a 40-75 or 40-80. Now, the challenge is the latest documentation and studies on that from Dan indicate that having a very low gradient factor for your gradient factor low is more akin to doing a pile stop. And again, that you're doing more on gassing than you really are doing off gassing. And so having an extremely low gradient factor for low, while yes, it does create a more conservative profile, it tends to create a much longer deco stop on your gradient factor high than is necessary to remain safe. So Dan came out with a suggestion that you don't use a gradient factor low below 45 or 50. And their suggestion is your gradient factor low be 45 or 50. Now, per standards, when we do our dives, just be aware that we will be doing a more aggressive gradient factor or more conservative gradient factor per standard. And I generally do day one at 30-50 or 30-60. And as we go through this, we'll set our computers to that more conservative gradient factor because it'll force us into deco much quicker. But we're compensating by using a much more conservative gradient factor high. So typically, as a diver, you want to stick around in the 50 to 80, 50 to 85 range. Now, with that said, be aware that that's your safety margin, and you can pull that gradient factor high back as needed. For example, if you're diving Yellowstone Lake and it's extremely cold, it might be to your advantage to pull that gradient factor high back to 75 or 80 and take the additional compensation based upon cold and altitude. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're able to increase your safety margin as you need. And that's one of the neat things about using the Bowman algorithm overall, is you're able to get a better idea of where you're at. Now, if you really want to get slick, an even better way to do this is you can order something like the O-Dive kit. My wife and I use the O-Dive for technical diving fairly regularly. And what it is literally a handheld Doppler. Hey, Nick, you want to run down and get the O-Dive?
Do you have to be, I know when that first came out, the O-Dive first came out, you had to be certified to use it. Is that still the case?
Nope, you can buy it. It's about $750 for the standard package.
Cool. Yeah, that thing's awesome.
Say again?
I said, yeah, that thing's awesome.
Yeah, it's very slick. So here's our little handy O-Dive kit. And here's what you get when you open it up. You get a plug-in for it to charge it. You get some belly squeeze sonogram goo, just like you'd use for your wife, and you get an O-Dive puck. And how it basically works is once you turn it on, let's see, here we go. It just flashes and comes on. You'll notice that there is like a notch cut out. And how that works is you literally take this and you put it on your collarbone and you lock that little notch into your collarbone and you turn the app on. It connects and reads. It takes, and then it gives you a breathing pattern it wants you to keep with. Once you've gotten a good reading that way, then it asks you to switch and you go to the other side. It reads the other side of arterial gas. And then you download your computer's data into it as well. And you do that 30 minutes after the dive and 1 hour after the dive. Once you've done that, it uploads it to their server and their AI reads the bubble patterns. If there's any indiscrepancies that the AI can't read, then it sends it off to an actual person who listens to it. And then it comes back with a recommendation. And once you open up your app, after it's got it back and says a completed dive, you're able to change. If I had used 37% nitrox instead of 36 or whatever, or if I'd used Trimix, or what had happened if I'd used a better or a lower gradient or a higher gradient, it'll make gradient suggestions for you as well. So you can get it down pretty accurately. And I played with it. We used to use 50-80. We increased based upon the O-Dive suggestion for our warm water diving. And we were able to determine and say, okay, we decided that it was better to use that, and you can play with it. And what we found is that based upon our O-Dive readings, we were good up to a 91% and still within a reasonable safety range on our gradient factor high for warm water dives. For cold water dives, it's definitely different. So overall, that's the basic idea. So now as we kind of go through this process of understanding our gradient factor, that gives us our idea of gradient factor low being our dynamic of our first stop. That's the point where we hit that magical gradient factor low number. And once our tissue compartments are slowed down and we're able to get below that 50%, the algorithm will figure a rate where you can comfortably get between your gradient factor low to your gradient factor high slowly enough and conservatively enough where it doesn't become a problem. So once you get to that first stop, it'll make sure that it slows and that you're well below the 50% mark of M value. And then it'll say, okay, you are okay to proceed to the next ceiling point.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's see. So, and we will get into actual deco stops here in just a little bit. But
hey, Benjamin, are you sharing anything on your screen? My computer.
I'm just verbally talking right now.
Yeah, your camera's been frozen for a little while.
Oh, has it? I'm sorry.
No, I mean,
I thought it was mine.
Am I still frozen?
Yep. I thought it was just maybe me. You're muted, David.
I thought it was mine too.
Am I frozen now? Can you see me?
No, you're a little laggy, but you're not frozen.
Okay, good. That's weird. It's got to be a software because I haven't had one issue this time. No, I'm using notes on my other screen just to make sure I stay in range of where I'm supposed to be. Cool. So now, as we got to go through this process, the other thing to understand is this is how we manage our M values on ascent. Now, another way we can manage those M values on ascent is we can do what's called an accelerated decompression. So what do you guys think I mean by accelerated decompression?
Isn't that using a higher concentration of oxygen to flush out the nitrogen?
Exactly. It's not so much that we're flushing out the nitrogen, but we're reducing the amount of nitrogen that's able to enter our system.
Lowering the gradient in your body, is that what it is?
Say again?
Lowering the gradient between the nitrogen in your blood versus the
the variation. So the kind of the interesting thing as we go through this, the hemoglobin barrier in our lung structure only allows about 10% of the oxygen that we breathe to actually pass the hemoglobin barrier into our bloodstream and out to our extremities. But because nitrogen is a non-bonding agent, all the nitrogen is able to pass. So if we're breathing 79% nitrogen, all 79% nitrogen is able to flush through. Now, where that gets interesting is if we're at 100 or 99 feet, we'll use a nice even number.
Okay.
That means that literally we've got the equivalent of 316% nitrogen flowing through. So if we reduce the amount of nitrogen in the blend, for example, if we go to a 60% blend of oxygen, that means we're only got 40% nitrogen allowed to pass through. So if we on that basis, that means now all of a sudden, instead of having 320% nitrogen able to flow through and continue to absorb, we only have 160% nitrogen. And what the body wants to do is get to equilibrium with everything around, and it will try and get the tissue from that 320% nitrogen concentrate to 160% nitrogen. So it'll allow that extra nitrogen off gas much more quickly because there's not as much nitrogen coming in. The body wants to be in equilibrium with everything around us down to that 160. And eventually, as we rise in the water column and we get that nitrogen level even lower, it'll want to off gas and equalize to that nitrogen point. But it's definitely an interesting thing as you start looking at it. It's not that the oxygen is flushing the nitrogen out. That's the way we like to talk about it in open water, but it's not correct. It really isn't. It's an oversimplification of a concept that's not really there. The truth of the matter is as we breathe, 10% of the oxygen that we can breathe is passing and bonding to the hemoglobin in our bloodstream. So the hemoglobin barrier in our lungs stops it and says, nope, you shall not pass, right? And we only lets 10% in. That's why carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide are so incredibly dangerous for us, is because they're part of the oxygen bond and oxygen concept, they will bond to the hemoglobin as well. Carbon dioxide is very dangerous and a very common thing that we see in diving for several different reasons. We see carbon dioxide coming out of diesel engines, for example. It will bond to the hemoglobin in our bloodstream and reduce our body's ability to uptake oxygen by 20 to 30%. So as you get on that dive boat and you hear that thing chugging along, that big diesel engine, get the hell away from that diesel engine. The idea of sitting in the back of the boat in the nice warm sunshine next to the diesel engine and exhaust, it's not as good and cool as it could be. Get away from the engine as much as you can. Carbon dioxide from a diesel compressor in your gas becomes extremely dangerous because as that carbon dioxide builds up under pressure, it becomes
carbon monoxide.
Carbon dioxide. And carbon monoxide. They both bond, but as that carbon dioxide and carbon dioxide can bond in and it goes under pressure, it actually can create a type of a pneumonia that you can never heal from. So you want to be very, very careful on that. So as we go through this process, just be aware that those are definitely things. Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and oxygen are bonding agents because of the oxygen in them. Nitrogen is not. Helium is not a bonding agent. So helium is used to replace the nitrogen in our system because it has a non-narcotic effect. Nitrogen has a narcotic effect as well, but it's a non-bonding agent. So this is kind of interesting as we kind of think about this and how oxygen passes from our breathing into our lungs and from our lungs into our bloodstream as you think about it. But the concept is it's time to get that concept out of the mind that oxygen is flushing out the nitrogen. That's not the case. Nope, there's a lower concentrate of nitrogen in the system, so the system wants to equalize and go into equilibrium with what's currently being breathed. And that's the kind of cool
high partial pressure.
Exactly. So good concept. So that's absolutely thing. So as we what ends up happening though is as we start coming out of solution up in the water column, the gas is coming out, and the way it starts, this gas is coming out of our system, out of these fast and slow tissue compartments, is it comes through as a free phase gas, and it starts out as silent bubbles, and from silent bubbles it moves its way to a larger bubble that we call bubble seeds. And as those bubbles get larger, they become problematic or symptomatic bubbles. The idea of utilizing the gradient factors and the Bowman values allows us to control the size of those silent bubbles and bubble seeds so that as they remain as a free phase gas instead of becoming a symptomatic bubble. That's what we're doing. That's really what the Bowman model is designed to do, is to manage the size of the bubbles that come out of our fast and slow tissues upon ascent. That's the whole thing we're doing. Now, there's a kind of a controversy, and it's recompression is highly controversial, and a majority of hyperbaric professionals advise against it. And what I mean by recompression, in water recompression, is that if something happens and you have to recompress because you've come up too fast, you've missed a deco stop, should you recompress in water? Most hyperbaric professionals will tell you advise against it. Here's where you can get away with it. If you surfaced on a deco stop and you were at the surface for less than 30 seconds to a minute, you can absolutely redescend before you become symptomatic down to your last deco stop, and you can recompress it that way. Where it becomes a problem is you blew a deco stop that was supposed to be 20 minutes. You get back on the boat, and 5 minutes later, you start feeling pain. You start feeling nauseous, vertigo, narrowing of vision. That's where it becomes a recompression underwater of a problem. In fact, I've actually had this happen where I had a 17-minute deco stop that I completely blew because of a current. I was flush to the surface and had no choice. Nothing I could do about it. I was on the surface for about 10 or 15 seconds before I was able to pull away from where the current was and redescend to my deco stop. So be aware. If you blow a deco stop, you can absolutely, if it's less than a minute, you can redescend to the previous deco stop. Just one. You can't do more than one. It's definitely important to remember no more than one deco stop at a time.
It helps to have a buddy too.
Say again?
It would help to have a buddy too to watch you.
It does. You should. That's part of buddy diving. Unfortunately, I was doing a solo dive. I was prepared for it. But it definitely was not something you wanted to be aware of.
Why do they recommend? Because like the in-water recompression, just the risk of like blackout or something? Because wouldn't that be doing the same thing in the hyperbaric chamber? I mean,
it is. And that's you hit exactly the reason why we don't do in-water recompression after you become symptomatic. Is once you get down, if you're starting to have heart palpitations or problems, blackout, anything like that, what's to say that if with vertigo that you don't go too deep or have a cardiac issue? You need to be at the surface where you can handle the issues that might arise. So if it's less than a minute before that you blow a deco stop, you can absolutely reascend to that deco stop no more than 10 feet, right? So in my case, I reascended to 15 feet. That was fine, and I extended my deco time considerably. I had to do 17 minutes. I ended up doing 25 minutes. And then I did a body deco after that.
I think the Navy manual says to that they double it. If you blow a deco stop or you feel symptomatic, like they can do one deco stop back down, and they have to double their time.
It does, and they come to determine that can be too much. That's okay. That's an excessive amount. Now to kind of reiterate about M value, I like this graph for this reason. The black line right here. Can you all see my screen?
No. Well, yes, but not the graph. It just says in water.
Yeah, it says in water.
Let me reshare and see if that fixes it. Thank you for letting me know, guys. Now can you see my screen?
Yes.
There we go.
Just need to reset. So this is a great one. This gives us an idea, basically, of what we're talking about. Here's your M value, and this is what your gradient factor is doing for you. So the idea with the gradient factor is gradient factor low starts us at our lowest point and make sure that we pull away from the M value. So it's taking us back over to our ambient pressure, and then we're able to reascend, and the M value again pulls us back away until eventually we get to the final point of our decompression where we're able to get back to a pure ambient pressure. But what the gradient factor is doing is literally pulling us back at a stair-stepped gradual, safe way to give us a safety margin between the M value line and where we're currently at. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. That's what it's literally doing for us. Is its goal is to keep us safe. And it's just another way to keep us safe overall. Let's see. So overall, part of how it does this is it determines what it's called is the half time or the half amount. I'm blanking here. The halftime concept. God.
Yeah, like the half-life.
Yeah, it's basically the half-life. And so what it does is it utilizes a saturation model based upon the half-time concept of what's it going to take to flush that tissue compartment by 50% to make sure that we're at the safe point. And so just like it sounds, the half-time concept is literally 50% of the total value. And so it's flushing it to a maximum of 50% to make sure that we're being safe. Now, interesting enough, I'm going to share another graph. When we start using a accelerated
to equilibrium with your current surroundings or your current
correct, exactly, good job. So as we start using the accelerated decompression model, if we were to use this all at the same depth, if we were using a back gas for decompression at 21%, our decompression at 40 would be 40 minutes. If we switched our decompression mix over to an EAN 50%, we can reduce and accelerate that decompression time from a 40-minute decompression stop to a 24-minute decompression stop. If we switch that same gas to 50% plus 100% mix as well, we can take that decompression mix from our time from 40 minutes all the way down to 19 minutes. And so that's how what our concept of using an accelerated decompression mix. So
that's if we're breathing EAN 50 and then deco on 100?
That's when we hit our decompression stop, our first decompression stop, and using a 50% blend on decompression stop 1, and then switching to 100% on our decompression stop 2.
Oh, I got you. Those are sequential. Gotcha.
Exactly. Now, in using decompression blends, you'll never start with 100% decompression blend. It's just not a good way to go, because the problem is how deep can you breathe 100%?
It's like 18 feet. It's something tiny, right?
Yeah.
What is it?
Isn't it like 8 feet?
No, do the math on it. Guys, do the math.
Okay.
1.4. Now, you can decompress at 1.6. So you can use a 1.6 decompression blend. How deep can you be? Do the math.
Okay. It's going to be 1 times 1 equals 1.6. 1.6 divided by 1 divided by 1.6. Oh, God damn it.
Chase, how did you just have that on top of your head?
Who?
Wasn't it you that said 18 feet?
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about it the other day.
Yeah.
So how deep what's the maximum depth at 1.6?
19 feet.
Don't guess. Do the math.
Okay. So how many
I
atmospheres?
used the app.
It's going to be 1 times the number of atmospheres.
It's not 18 feet, by the way, guys.
It's going to be, God damn it, 1.6 atmospheres.
You're going to be at 19.8
Good.
out of 1.6.
It's 20 feet. Yeah, your max operating depth for 100% is 20 feet at sea level.
I thought we always had to round down for factor of safety.
33 times 1.6 minus 33. Yeah, 19.8.
What formula?
19 feet. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be your number of atmospheres, or it's going to be a 1.6 times your number of atmospheres, but then you have to subtract your surface atmosphere. So it's going to be 1.6 times 33.
Are you using seawater? Are you using seawater or fresh water?
I'm using
Which one do you want?
We're doing everything in seawater
Fresh.
today.
Freshwater will be 20.4.
Yeah, so it's going to be 1.6 times 34 minus 34.
Yep.
I have to get the answer.
So say 20 feet. I mean, you're 0.2 away from 20 feet or 0.2 away from 20 feet. So generally, the generally accepted is 20 feet, right? It's close enough there. You generally float at 19 feet anyway, but it gives you the idea that the problem is you don't want to come all the way up to, you're going to hit deco ceilings between then. So as you're doing your decompression mix and decompression dynamic, you're generally going to want a more a gas that you can use it deeper. So the typical decompression blend for a first point is going to be around EAN 50 to EAN 60. I generally use 55 or 60 is my number. But if I was using EAN 50, what's my first depth at 1.6?
74.8.
So my first deco ceiling is going to be 70, most likely.
Okay.
I can switch over to my deco blend at that point because it's now safe, and I can clear that and reduce the partial pressure of the nitrogen in my system dramatically, and I can continue that from 70 feet to 60 feet to 50 feet to 40 feet to 30 feet to 20 feet, and at 20 feet I can switch over to my 100% blend, and I can flush the rest of it very quickly.
And you can do 1.6 partial pressure for that last stop, right?
Well, all of it. All decompression can be done at 1.6 for accelerated decompression.
Really?
Yes.
Well, 1.4 is max for work, right? And then a decompression
Correct.
stop, you're not working.
Oh,
Exactly. For diving, 1.4. For travel, bottom, and working, 1.4. But for decompression, we can now go to 1.6 for a higher partial pressure. But there's something else in that calculation of using 1.6. There's another piece of that we need to make sure we're adding to that. What is that, Josh?
Well, it's going to be your oxygen, your CNS.
Exactly. Good job. Josh paid attention. I'm so proud of you. So absolutely, we need to make sure we're taking into account the higher partial pressure and into our oxygen toxicity. So, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for you to start thinking about. So, as we start thinking about this, we want to definitely start thinking about our decompression stops, what a ceiling is, what a safety stop is, what happens if we miss a safety stop, and what a body decompression stop is. So let's start with decompression stops. David, tell me, what is a decompression stop?
Tell you what.
What is it? What is a decompression stop?
A point where you can off gas under pressure to reduce the amount of nitrogen in your bloodstream.
Exactly. What's the difference between a decompression stop and a safety stop, Chase?
A safety stop isn't theoretically necessary. It's just a protective feature, whereas a deco stop is a process that if you don't do, you have a high likelihood of decompression sickness.
Exactly. I like to think of a safety stop like a yield or a yellow light. A decompression stop is a stop sign or a red light. That's your choice. You can either you are stopped there. So as we think about these decompression stops, we have a magical new term called the ceiling. Josh, what do you think I mean when I talk about the ceiling of my dive?
The ceiling is going to be the max you can ascend without getting decompression sickness, right?
Absolutely. So my decompression stop is going to be at my ceiling point. And so typically what you're going to see happen, the apex tends to be very conservative on this, but you'll see your ceiling slowly lower and lower and lower and lower. The first ceiling will be 20 feet. The next ceiling will pull down to 30 feet, and then it'll pull you down to 40 feet. It is the highest point in the water column I can rise, and that will allow me to stay below the M value.
Well, it's the M value minus the gradient factor, right? Whatever you have the gradient factor.
Ding, ding, ding. Good job. Good job. So to put a fine point on, a decompression stop is a procedure that always takes place towards the end of the dive. This is the time we spend at a given depth to reduce the amount of nitrogen or helium remaining in the tissue before we rise to the surface. Now, the decompression stops differ according to each dive profile, dependent upon the max depth reached during the dive, as well as the time spent underwater at this depth. Depth and time are given by decompression tables or the dive computer. So as we look at that,
by a repetitive dive, if you still have nitrogen buildup in a slow tissue compartment, can't it?
I'm sorry, say that again.
It can also be affected by a repetitive dive if you still have nitrogen buildup in a slow tissue compartment or any tissue compartment.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely reduces, and the residual nitrogen is absolutely a factor. But it still happens at the end of the dive. Now, typically in decompression diving, you generally will usually do only one in a day. Now, you certainly can do more decompressions dives in a day, depending upon the size of them. But if you're doing a big 3-hour deco dive, that's your dive for the day. You're just asking for problems for any dives after that. So why do it? So the first part of that this is not only understanding our decompression stop procedure, but where our sealing is going to be as well. And the nice thing is our computers are going to tell us that. They're going to say, okay, your sealing is this. Stay below this. For example, in the DSX, it's going to come up and it'll tell you sealing 30 feet for 2 minutes. The Shearwater will do the same exact thing. It'll give you a sealing, and then it'll give you a time next to that. Same thing with the Sunto Black. It's interesting. Each one of you is going to be using a different computer. So Chase will be using an Apex. Mike, you're going to be using a Perdix. David, you're going to be using a Sunto Black. Most likely, Josh is going to be using a Perdix as well. And I'll probably be using an Apex and a Garmin.
All of them.
I do have all of those actually. I have 4 separate tech computers. It's stupid. And my wife only has 3. So she's kind of missing out. It just is what it is. So some of the joys of being a tech instructor at a dive shop that wants you to be familiar with what they could sell, right? So that's really what it ends up being. If it were me and I hadn't had to worry about that, I probably would only have a Perdix at this point, and that's all I'd be diving. I'm a big believer in find what you like and just stick with it. But because I work at a dive shop, truthfully, I now have an Apex because they wanted me to be familiar with it and have an honest opinion of that. And then the Sunto rep wanted me to know what it was like to dive a Sunto and what that was like. And so I have dove them all, and they're all good computers. They all have their own quirks and differences. And dynamics. They each have benefits. The Apex is great for side mount. The Shearwater is great for side mount. The Sunto Black is not good for side mount at all in any way, shape, or form. But it's a good, easy computer to work with, and definitely wants to keep you safe. And the Garmin is a great computer. It's not fantastic for side mount, but it does a fantastic job for deco and understanding. So they each have their pros and cons. There's no one perfect computer out there overall. But as you start looking at it, it'll look something like, share screen.
So Ben, do you normally set the last stop to?
Yes, I because I dive a lot of Florida, I always keep my last stop to 20 feet. Okay. You can set them to 10 feet or 20 feet. I prefer 20 feet because that will give me a depth deep enough that I probably won't get run over by a boat.
Sure. No, my Garmin's just the default is 15. So
yeah, I set 20 feet because I want to be below the general boat limit.
Sure.
Or have the ability to get if there is a boat that's a little taller than that, then I'm able to get even lower than that. So as we look at these computers, overall, we're able to get a basic idea of what's going on here. What it's trying to tell you is my ceiling is X. And so at this point, my deco window, and I'm within ceiling, what it's trying to tell me is the safety margin wants me to return down. If I've come up too high, it'll give me a red arrow and tell me to continue down. Now, one of the biggest things I see with new deco divers is it's kind of like I don't know if any of you ever hunted with horses, but in hunting with horses, the first thing you have to do is get them past being gun shy. The first time they hear a gun go off 10 feet from them, they freak out. Oh, stop that. I need to figure out how to turn that off. So that'll be your homework assignment, Chase. How do I turn off the haptics?
It's all right. You're frozen. We can't see it.
Oh, okay. Am I still frozen?
Yeah.
That is weird.
You're just full screen frozen. It's funny because when you change your screens, it'll shift over to presentation mode just fine. We'll see all that, but it's something about you, man. You're the Medusa.
I am the Medusa. Okay, well, it keeps doing.
It's all this rain killing your radio.
Must be. So anyway, so the moral of the story is with Deco and on the Deco computer, it's a lot like training horses to go hunting. The first time they hear that gunshot, they freak out. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And they freak out and they want to run like hell. The second time they heard it, it's not as big a deal. It's still scary though for them. So you literally have to remove them being gun shy. You know, that's where that comes from, as horses and hunting is being gun shy. They hear that bang. Same thing with deco divers. As you deco divers see that first time of going into deco, they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. And so one of the things we're working on through this course is to get you guys to the point where you guys are no longer afraid of the magic deco, that you prepared enough ahead of time that it's no longer a problem for you, and you're able to continue past into the safety realm.
Okay.
What part is in this analogy is the gunshot? Is it your computer telling you that you've
going into
you've
deco?
exceeded?
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Once most divers see that computer actually go into deco, they freak out. And they're like, and their heart starts racing. I've seen it enough times to know that it gets really scary for some divers to go into deco. So let's see what it looks like to actually go into deco. I just happen to have a video of all four of the computers that will be being used during our dive on Saturday, Sunday, and then the following week. This is what it's actually going to look like. This is Ryrie Reservoir a few weeks ago, and we've got the Sunto Black, the Shearwater, the Garmin, and the DSX. Each one of them set to their specific mode overall. I'm going to jump forward just a little bit. You're welcome to go back and watch this video because I've got a lot of really good stuff in it as well. It talks about these computers. But as you look at them, the first thing you'll notice is each one of them is going to give you time to NDL, no deco time. For example, in this particular case, the Apex has got 6 minutes till deco runs out. The Garmin is 7 minutes. The Shearwater is 6 minutes, and the Sunto Black is 10 minutes. As we continue into the process, we're starting to get. I'm going to pull away from this screen just a little bit more. We can start seeing that we're starting to get warning notifications, and all of a sudden now we've got 4 minutes till deco, 5 minutes till deco, 4 minutes till deco, and 3 minutes till deco. Overall,
on the Shearwater, once you're in deco mode, theoretically, your surface gradient's probably going to be over 100% or at least over 80%, whatever your upper limit is, right?
It's going to be over the gradient factor limit. So
Okay.
right now you can see I'm 4 minutes till deco, and my gradient factor is at 64%.
Yeah.
At surface.
So
My
at
surface
80, if you've got it set to 80, or I think you said in this video, you might have it set to 80 or 85. Once it goes into 85, we should see that NDL go down to 0.
Correct.
Okay.
And there we go. So we're a little closer in. Now we're at 75% gradient factor surface, and we have 2 minutes to NDL. Now, interesting enough, gradient factor 99. This is where I'm at right now at depth. And it says on. It means I'm still on gassing.
Okay.
So now we're 2 minutes. Let's see. There we go. 1 minute, and we're at 82%.
Okay.
Still on gassing, though. And you can see that the Sunto has got 0 minutes. The Garmin's 2 minutes. The Apex is 1 minute. There we go. Just switched over. So now the Sunto is a 10-foot ceiling with 4 minutes of deco. We still have 1 minute till it's probably actually less than 1 minute till NDL, but we can see we're at 85% on surface. And the Sunto's being, or the Garmin's or Shearwater's being a little bit more aggressive. Now we're at 80%. It's taking into account the set time, I'm sure. But there we go. So 0 NDL. We've got now 20 foot for 1 minute, 10 feet for 6 minutes, 20 feet for 1 minute and 9 seconds, and 20 feet for 2 minutes. That's what deco is actually going to look like.
Okay.
Now here's where you don't stress. 20 minutes and 20 minutes or 20 feet for 2 minutes of deco is what we've got in. Look at my gas.
Yeah.
2,400 PSI of gas. Same thing over here. 20 minutes or 20 feet for 1 minute, 2,400 pounds of gas. 10 feet for 6 minutes, 2,400 pounds of gas. And 20 minutes for 1 minute or 1 minute, 9 seconds, 2,400 pounds of gas. That's what deco looks like. So as we start seeing deco, we don't stress. We're like, oh, what does that really look like? 20 minutes of 2 minute, 20 feet for 2 minutes. Still have 2,300 pounds of gas. I've got 2,400 pounds of gas over here is what it's saying. And I've got 1 minute 32. So we'll jump a little farther into that. We're at 111 feet. We've built up. Let me get that back. There we go. Now the Sunto or the Apex has moved up to 30 feet for 1 minute. So, but I still have 2,200 pounds of gas. No stress. I've got all the time in the world. If I come up directly to the surface, and now interesting enough, my gradient factor surface on the Shearwater is 106%. So, but now here's the cool thing. Look at where the gradient factor is currently. I'm still on gassing. I haven't moved out of the on gassing portion yet. Move a little farther in, I'm still ascending. And finally, I'm starting my ascent. I'm at 91 feet, and it's just now starting to, my tissue compartments are actually starting to load up. So I'm at 1%, but I'm at 111% at surface gradient, 30 feet in 1 minute, 20 feet for, can't quite tell. It's a little dark.
So with the GF99, if you were fully saturated at you're at 84 feet right now. If you're fully saturated at 84 feet, you're not super saturated, just fully saturated. Mm-hmm. The GF99 would show 0, right?
No, it would show the actual saturation point. It's telling you what the lead compartment is.
But in relation, what I'm saying is that if you descended to, say, 100 feet and you just stopped at 100 feet, and you were
eventually that would get up to 100. It would get up to 100% saturation.
Okay. I thought it was showing super saturation. Yeah. I thought 0% was saturated, and then 100% was your basically at the M value.
Yeah, this was a short dive. Right now I'm only 23 minutes into this dive, but if you stay at a depth long enough, you'll saturate out completely. Mm-hmm. Overall, so it takes time for that saturation to come off.
Okay,
you can saturate. Go ahead.
If you hit 100% saturation, well, first off, is it even feasible to do as a scuba diver, or is that like commercial divers who go down for 4 days at a time?
That's commercial diving. I've never seen 100% on any tissue compartment.
I was just saying
that it will take. Yeah, that's critical mass, and you're in a diving bell.
So at that point, it's just controlled decompression to get that off.
Exactly.
Just Puro and a deco chamber.
And accelerate, and you're going to have to do a higher pressure gas as well. So you're going to be doing a decompression blend of something as well. Now, this is what you see in your computers on your phones. When you pull these computers up, this is what it's actually going to look like. So in this particular case, for the Apex, you can see right here, this is where I went into deco. And this is the point where I came out of deco, where I'd cleared my deco point, and I was just ready to do a safety stop.
The red area. We can't see your cursor.
Oh, sorry. Now can you see
it?
it?
There it is. Yeah.
There.
Sorry, I was on the wrong screen because I've got it shared and I've got it up. So this is my actual decompression area. One of the things I do like about the Garmin and the Shearwater is that it gives you your actual decompression ceiling, and that's what this is. Cool. What my depth was at ceiling. So my ceiling in this particular case was 20 feet. It actually shows you the ceiling point. And the same thing with the Garmin or the Shearwater as well. It'll actually give you a ceiling point.
And if you exceeded that, you'd be beyond your gradient factor limit.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You would have violated your deco ceiling is your magic term for the day.
Now, how forgiving are these computers in your experience? So if I'm doing a deco stop and I'm at my ceiling and I bump up 2 feet, it's not going to put me in violation mode for 24 hours, is it?
No. None of these computers violate like that. It will tell you violated it, but it won't violate you to lock you out.
Okay.
None of these computers are designed to lock you out, which is kind of a nice deal. But it will definitely tell you. The nice thing is if you're only within a few feet of violating, and I've absolutely violated by 10 feet, and then reduced back, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But you can certainly violate and return to that point.
Okay.
And it will calculate that out and help you. The Apex is a little less forgiving on that, but yeah, in terms of time, but it will definitely take into account and allow you to return back to your correct point and help you time that out. The one that's the hardest when it comes to the app is the Suunto. It gives you a point, an activity log point. It doesn't tell you where, but it gives you these activity points. You have to go back and click on the activity points and say, okay, what was that? What was that? It doesn't tell you exactly where you went into deco by visualization, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this is what it looks like. Like I said, my biggest goal is to get you past the gun shyness of this and understand this is what deco looks like on your computer. This is what you will see as you go through this. And you can see I'm still in deco on this, and my surface gradient is now 85%. There we go, 85%. And there we go. I'm still at 85%, and it goes to a clear timer. Now, here's one of the things that's concerning for me about the Apex is if you break into deco, it doesn't give you an additional timer for safety stop. And it is definitely encouraged that even after doing a decompression stop, that you do a 3 to 5 minute safety stop as well. All it's going to do is reduce your gradient and M value just a little bit more to make sure that when you do finally surface, you have a better gradient safety factor. Because remember, these gradient factors are based upon a theoretical level. It's not a physical thing that says, okay, I read Chase's bloodstream today, and I determined that the bubble size was at 85%. It's using a theoretical value. So adding a little bit of theoretical value is definitely to your advantage to make sure that you're safe.
So if you set your last stop depth to your safety stop depth, is there a difference, or are you expected to roll in the extra 3 minutes or 5 minutes safety stop time on top of the deco stop time, that last deco stop time?
You're expected to roll it in. Now, if you look on the Shearwater, one of the things it'll tell you is it'll give you a timer from the point you cleared your deco.
Okay.
And the Suunto will actually give you an actual safety stop counter as well. So there we go. So it kicked over, and now you can see there's an actual safety stop counter.
So when you're doing your dive plan, do you then put that into the computer? Like if you're using an app to figure out like multiple gases and stuff,
That's a great question, and absolutely, I use it as part of my gas planning to make sure that I've got enough gas to cover another additional 3 minutes to 5 minutes of safety stop as well. And I use it as a safety margin. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking when like you can put in all the right gases and everything, but like if you're using an app to plan your dive, it's not going to match the computer, right? As far as the deco stops.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, if you look at those four computers don't agree with each other as far as stops. So unless you're planning on your computer, like, because I know some of the apps connect to the computer for planning, you're not going to see the same thing twice ever, really.
Or do you follow the computer or do you follow your plan?
You should follow your plan because your plan will always be more conservative than your dive computer.
Unless you blew your plan for some reason or whatever, then fall back to the computer.
Exactly. Now, what you'll find in practice is most divers do a basic plan and then follow their computer, and they try and follow their computer to the accuracy point based upon their plan. What you'll find in real practice of lazy divers is they just do a basic plan and then they follow their computer based upon their basic plan for gas management. Now, the nice thing with the computer is it will take into account the time you were not, if you're doing a dive plan, for example, to 130 feet for 30 minutes, and you calculate out your bottom time. So let's look at that. Let's do an actual dive plan. One of the suggestions I'm going to make for you guys is to all go online tonight after this and download Subsurface. It's free.
Subsurface dive log.
Yep. Subsurface dive planner. Yep. So this is what the dive planner software actually looks like. And this is the one we're going to use overall. So the nice thing is we can say, okay, we're diving at 5,000 foot elevation. Is going to be 8.833 millibar overall. So if I were doing this dive plan, I would plan out 100 cubic foot tank, which is 12.9 liters, starting pressure 3,200 PSI of 21% oxygen overall. Bam. Okay, so and our first dive, we'll just say, is going to be 120 feet. It's going to take us 4 minutes to get there. We're good. 120 feet. Sorry, I'm typoing. And we're going to remain at 120 feet for 30 minutes. There we go.
So, download, do you mean the on your computer or is it an app or something?
On your computer. Unfortunately, the app does not do dive planning on this one. But I like this because it's free. So now as we look at this overall, now we can say, okay, we descended to 120 feet. We're going to say 5 minutes because that's more apropos. If we're at Ryrie, it's going to be more like 7 minutes to get to 120 feet. So what it's saying is it's going to take us 4 minutes to get to 120 feet. We're going to be at 120 feet for 30 minutes, and then we're going to start our ascension profile. And in this particular case, our ascension profile is going to look like our first ceiling is at 50 feet. We're going to remain at 50 feet for 2 minutes. And it's going to take us 2 minutes to get there. And then we're going to ascend to 40 feet, and we're going to stay there for 5 minutes. And then we're going to come to 30 feet, and we're going to stay there for 7 minutes. We're going to come to 20 feet, and we're going to stay there for 68 minutes. And that's based upon a 50-85 running air, no deco, no accelerated deco. So here's the problem with this, though. As we look at this, who of us among us has ever done a dive where we stayed perfectly at 120 feet?
Never.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
Our dives more look like 110 for 3 minutes.
This is also giving you a 12 liter per minute bottom sack.
Yeah. But it calculates accordingly by volume as well.
Okay.
11.
So that's not 12 liters per minute at 120 feet.
No, it does the calculation difference, right?
Okay. Can you click and drag the points too?
You can, absolutely. Oh, there we go. So you can absolutely drag these points, but we all know that I just needed to add enough points in there that our dive is going to look more like that. All right. It's going to be up and down, up and down, up and down. Right. So the nice thing is our computers are going to take into account that rise and fall, that actual time to depth. It's also going to take into account our time to surface as well. 894 minutes. Let's put 4 minutes there. I got a little crazy with the mouse, but it's also, and this is going to look more what it's going to look like at Ryrie as well. Dang it. Come on. 12 minutes. There we go. So this is more what I'm going to thin this out a little bit. So our dive at Ryrie is going to look more like this, 120 feet. This will be our big dive, right? 120 feet. Then we're going to come back to 70 feet. We're going to come back to 50 feet. Well, let's see, 120 feet for we'll say 5 minutes. 50 minutes, let's say 6 minutes just for fun. And then 70 feet. 50 feet. And so on. So this will be, our big dive will look more like this overall. We're going to go down to depth. We're going to do some stuff. And we're going to rise up to this point, and then we're going to do our deco at 20 feet. So that's more what it's going to look like overall. But we're if we were to count this in just a general dive planner, this would literally be a 28-minute dive at 120 feet. And as you saw really quickly, if we did 28 feet or 120 feet for 28 minutes, all of a sudden our deco time is considerably more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's giving it, we just need to be aware that our dive plan is not going to look like this, but this gives us a general outline of what it's going to look like.
How does it change if you were to add in deco gases?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. So let's go ahead and let's get crazy on this, and we'll say we're going to stay down for 40 minutes. If we were going to stay at 40 minutes at 120 feet, that's a 146-minute dive. At 20 feet, that's 85 minutes of deco plus 9 minutes. So that's 94 minutes of deco plus 6 minutes. That's 100 minutes of deco plus 3 more minutes, 103 minutes of deco. But great question. What happens if we decide to do some accelerated deco? First off, guys, what is our best mix for 120 feet? What's best blend? Who's got it for me? It's definitely not 21%.
My calculator. Josh is going to beat me on this. I know he is.
What was the what were we looking at? The depth?
120 feet is our depth. At 1.4, what's our best blend? What gas should we be diving?
34.5 or 30.2, sorry.
So 30%?
I have
Now
30.9 because it's fresh water, not salt water.
Oh,
Okay.
gotcha. Yep.
Okay, and that's 1.4 though, or that's a 1.4 PPO2. So
Yeah,
if we want to put in a margin of safety in there, say a 1.1 PPO2.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and plug that in. 30%. Remember, we're at 146 minutes of dive time right now. By switching from 21% to 30%, we went from 146 minutes to 90 minutes.
Oh wow. 20. Yeah.
That's breathing 30% the whole time, right, Ben?
Yeah. That's breathing. And good catch, Josh. Very good catch. I am getting there. You're jumping ahead on me. Okay, so we just saved ourselves 56 minutes of time just by best blend. So we still getting the same amount of bottom time. We haven't changed our bottom time. We just changed the amount of time we have to sit and play with crawdads, right? But magic question, what happens if we had a 40% blend of gas for a deco blend? Let's throw that in.
Oh, it tells you when to switch.
Yep. So we went from 146 minutes to 90 minutes. So 146 to 90.
And your tank
Let's
pressure.
add a deco blend of 40%. Now all of a sudden we went to 78 minutes of total time. So by adding a deco blend for accelerated decompression and the best mix, we've saved almost 50%.
Oh, and you can change your deco PO2 because right now it's set to 1 bar. If you change that to 1.6, that's going to drop it significantly too, isn't it? That's bottom PPO2.
Yep.
And this is that subsurface app that you're
This is
using?
Surface. Absolutely.
This is fantastic.
Now, here's a better question for you: is what if we had a better blend? What if you guys were certified for 55%? We just saved ourselves 8 minutes by doing a 55% blend.
Okay.
What happens if, to Josh's point, what happens if we had a 90% as well? So if we had a 90% blend, or that took us to 61 minutes, what if about 100% blend? Same thing. It's not that big a difference, but we went by utilizing the correct gases in this. We went from 146 minutes to 90 minutes to 78 minutes to 61 minutes. Is that a reasonable difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that safer?
Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely.
You're getting a little low.
So that's how decompression, accelerated decompression works. Literally, we saved ourselves, let's do the math. 146 minus 61. We saved ourselves 85 minutes of decompression by using the correct gases overall.
Yeah.
Now,
Plus a bit of narcosis.
Ben, can you change that tank type from aluminum 80s to a more reasonable deco bottle?
Of course.
I just want to see if that changes when it tells you to do things.
I'm not going to tell you when to do it, but it will tell you when you're running low on gas. For example, at the current gas, I don't use this for gas planning because I don't like the gas planning on this. Overall, it's not been impressive. But if on my first tank, it's trying to tell me that I would be at 796 psi. I don't believe that. I don't think that that's correct. On my sac rate, it probably is close, but it'll give you gas management as well.
Does this have the ability to change your tank or your stop time, your empty tank to thirds?
Yes, you can certainly do that. I don't use this for gas management. I discourage using this for your gas management. I do gas management by hand.
Okay.
So you can also set it to do your last stop at 20 feet or do a 10-foot, your last stop at 10 feet. Now, here's something interesting for you guys. Check this out. If I do my last stop at 20 feet, my total time is 61 minutes. If I do my last stop at 10 feet, I lose a minute of time.
But that's just the time it takes you to ascend, isn't it?
No. You said you lose a minute of time as in
total runtime. So now instead of at 20 feet, my total time when I pop the surface is going to be 61 minutes, and I'm doing 13 minutes of deco at 20 feet. If I remove that, I'm doing 5 minutes of my deco at 20 feet and 8 minutes of my deco at 10 feet, and my total runtime is 60 minutes.
Because at 10 feet,
Say again?
Great pressure difference between what's in your blood and what's in your lungs.
Correct. So, this for depth and management or for deco management, this is a great piece of software. It's free, and I definitely like free. I do not use this software for gas management, and we'll go through gas management in my spreadsheet. My spreadsheet is far more accurate than this. I've just not been a fan of this in real life or practicality. So that's mine. But the nice thing is you can play with this to your little heart's content, and you can get better ideas of where you want. And if you wanted to play with VPM, a different model, it's in here as well. So that gives you a good idea of what deco really looks like.
Okay.
And you can plan as deep a dive as you want. You want to, hey, let's go to a cave. We're going to do 900 feet. And it's going to take us 16 minutes to get there. And we want to stay at that 900 feet for 15 minutes. Or maybe we want to hit the deck of the SS Tahoe. That's 405 feet. 405 feet. And let's see, that is at, remember, right, Tahoe is at 6,400 foot elevation. So if we want to spend 15 minutes on the deck of the SS Tahoe with 60, we'll say 10 minutes of descent time. Let's see, 12. Just
Oh my gosh.
You're gonna need a bigger tank.
You're cruising.
yeah, you're definitely running out of gas. But to spend 15 minutes on the SS Tahoe is 174 minutes. But here's the problem: is you're not going to be able to use that 30%. It's going to be a 5%, 570. Let's see, 100. Let's see. You're going to need
Your work of reading is going to be incredible too.
60. Well, that's why you want to go to helium.
Oh,
Let's
yeah,
see.
yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
580, sorry. 1070.
Oh, shoot, I might go to hydrogen.
15, and blow the shit out of yourself.
There's not enough oxygen.
Can you? Yeah, Ben, you can't use that gas as a descent gas.
Nope.
Hey, just as a heads up, Tahoe is pretty cold, so you're going to want to pack a dry suit for this dive.
Well,
There
we'll
you
need some water on then too.
But you can do all the planning you want out of this. You can add helium. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. But if you're going to use helium, you're going to spend some time, because helium is going to increase your factor quite a bit. So anyway, play with this all you want. It's a lot of fun to play with. But this is how we're going to plan our dives for Saturday.
Okay.
Does this have the functionality to give you recommendations on best mix for gas for a specific dive?
It doesn't. It'll just give you an error message, and in the practical warning low PPO2 value of 15%. So it's going to tell you in the warnings of that, but you need to be able to do the math yourself.
Gotcha.
So now it's giving me warning factors of where, and so you're going to definitely need to build up multiple gases on this. So overall, kind of fun to play with. 120. 120. And it definitely does not like that. Let's see. So 15%. 30%. There we go. There we go. So there's using a 1530. We'll do a 2130 helium. There we go. So interesting enough, there's your 2130 helium, but you can play with this all you want, have some fun with it. It'll definitely give you some interesting factors out, but this is how you do it. But overall, the moral of the story was that you kind of get back on target. When we didn't use the correct gas, we had a 146-minute dive. When we used the best blend, we reduced that to 90 minutes. When we added our first decompression mix, we took it down to 78 minutes, and we added a second accelerated decompression mix. We took it to 61 minutes. Pretty cool?
Yeah.
Okay. That was the goal. Was pretty cool. Already got it. All right. So how is a good decompression stop done? Now, the ideal way to make a good decompression stop is to stay in the horizontal position for as long as possible. Now, in this position, your body slows down the water in the water column and helps you stay at the right depth. And that's your key. David, we talked about this today while you were in your twin sets. You want to stay in that good horizontal position. If you've got a 90-foot, then an 80-foot, then a 70-foot, then a 60-foot decompression stop, you're not going to go heads up, swim up to it, and then go vertical. You just want to start finning up and staying in the horizontal position. Now, the extended position also allows the entire body to be subject to the same pressure. And it's essential to breathe slowly and deeply so the blood circulates better and promotes the return of nitrogen to the lungs. Now, certain behaviors are to be avoided during a diving stage, like making apnea or hyperventilations, and not respecting the depth or the decompression stop. So we want to make sure we're breathing normally. We're not holding our breath. we're not over breathing, and we're making sure to respect the depth of our decompression ceiling stop. Take your time. Decompression is not a fast thing. It's not designed to go quickly. It goes at its own time. So the biggest thing I can tell you about diving is you should be, at this point, heading towards very patient. Your job, honestly, can you guys still see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Your job is to focus on this square foot of the ocean at this time. That's all you're looking for. I'm trying to teach you guys to do nothing and enjoy it. That's what diving's about. This is, if you're into a fast, high-speed sport, learn to fly a plane and jump out of it. That's a high-speed sport. This is not that sport. Diving is about slow, methodical thought process with pre-planning. The more you can get that through your head, the better off you're going to be. Now, the ceiling is a key point. And in dissolved gas decompression algorithms, the ceiling is the depth at which the dissolved gas pressure in at least one tissue compartment equals the maximum tolerated value defined by the algorithm. So always stay below or just at your ceiling. Once the ceiling is established, you'll not need to ascend more than 10 feet at a time on each required decompression requirement until you get to the 20-foot mark. At this depth, once your decompression obligation has completed, then you can now begin your safety stop. So in terms of ceilings, they're never going to progress more than 10 feet at a time. You'll see this, Apex is kind of neat on how it does this, is you'll see them go down. You'll see that 20-foot, then it'll go to 30-foot, then it'll go to 40-foot. And it's very visual on how it does it. I kind of like how the Apex does that one over the Shearwater. The Shearwater sets the ceiling and you see it, but it's not as in your face as the Apex, I think. But and it's very clear that 20 feet for 3 minutes, 30 feet for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 40 feet for 5 minutes, whatever it is. It gives you that very clear. But all your ceilings will always descend 10 feet at a time. So as you're ascending in the water column to your deco stops, they'll always be 10 feet at a time. Make sense?
Yep.
Now, once you finally clear that decompression ceiling, you're going to go ahead and do a safety stop. 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. That's up to you. But a 3-minute safety stop minimum is definitely a high recommendation in the process of this.
So I would just add that on to
Yes.
my 20-foot last deco stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's think about this for a moment. Let's do the math on it. How much gas does it require for me to do 3 minutes at 20 feet at zero effort?
For you're what, 6'4"? Nikki's 4, right?
Nikki, I've seen Nikki at 4 and 5. So just say you guys for 15. Your guys are going through 15 liters a minute. I did your sack rate the other day from Saturday, Chase, and I think I saw you at 17 to 17 and a half was pretty average. You'll thin down.
Yeah.
My sack rate for Saturday was 9 and 10, by the way, in case you wondered.
So for you, it's going to be 15 liters per minute over 3 minutes. So that's 45 liters.
Times depth.
That's with depth.
Okay. Yeah. So mine is 15 liters per minute. So I need 45. Is that very much gas?
No.
No, it's not a ton of gas. It's fairly negligible. It's certainly worth planning in there, that extra 45, 50 liters of gas. But if you've kept a good, strong safety margin, 45, 50, 60 liters of gas is really not a big deal. It's literally change. We've come out of the $5 and $1, and we've gone to nickels and dimes at this point. So while you should plan for it, it's not a huge deal to blow into your reserve a little bit more than you had thought if you're using rule of thirds to use that up. Now, a magic question that a lot of you guys should be asking yourselves is what happens if you miss a decompression stop? Has that occurred to anybody?
You should probably tell your buddy or the rest of the crew pretty quickly, get on oxygen and get over to the hospital.
In less than a minute, you can go down and.
Yeah.
There you go. Now, if a diver has ascended less than 3 meters or 10 feet above the decompression stop and can't return in less than 1 minute, return to the depth of the missed stop and complete the scheduled time and remain 1 minute longer. Let's say that again. So if you can't return in a minute, if it's 2 minutes, return to 10 feet down and stay that whole time. Chase, your homework is to turn off those damn haptics. They're driving me nuts.
All right, I'll figure it out.
There we go. Thank you. There's your confetti. So return to the one deco stop lower and stay for the whole time plus 1 minute. Now, if more than a minute remains at the higher stop until the runtime, the new stop has ended, for every minute of missed depth at deco, add an additional time to your last deco stop and extend your safety stop by 3 to 5 minutes. So if you do it by more than 10 feet and more than 2 minutes, you need to, for every minute missed at that decompression stop, add that time to your last deco stop. So if you're at 50 feet and you're supposed to be there for 10 minutes and you were there for 9 minutes and you can't get back down and you come up to the 40-foot mark, add that 1 minute to the final deco stop at 20 feet. I'm just gonna keep my damn hands down. Driving me batty. When you get to that 20-minute and your final deco stop is supposed to be 10 minutes, stay for 11 minutes and extend your additional safety stop by 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Now, what would your computer be doing at that time? Would it revert back to your previous time at that depth, or would it just give you an error?
It'll refer back to, it'll start counting from the previous deco stop, and it'll start adding the calculations based upon the M value. So it's going to figure out the new M values based upon where you're at in the water column.
Got it. So still worth paying attention to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the last part of this is I encourage you strongly, and this isn't in the book, and you'll have a hard time finding it in any book, but this is kind of for people who do a lot of decompression deco diving. We call it body deco. Now, you all realized very quickly that when we get out of the water at Ryrie Reservoir, is it an easy climb to get our crap back to the power shelf or up to the truck?
No.
Now, if it's not easy, what's happening to the gases in our body as we crunch those through our legs and our arms, carrying those damn tanks up the god dang hill?
You're shaking up the soda, man.
Absolutely. We're off-gassing even more. We're forcing an off-gas through exertion in the muscles and through exertion through the cardiovascular system. So as we get out, we're going to off-gas a lot faster than we would appreciate. And we can still cause deco. This is the same thing can also happen if you're one of those bright stars that goes on a 3-a-day and then gets back to the hotel after they get off the boat and hops in the hot tub. Don't do that either. That's just a bad idea. But let's kind of return back to this body decompression. So one of the things I'm going to encourage you guys to do is after you've done your deco stop, after you've done your 3 to 5 minute safety stop, stay in the water with your head out of the water for 10 minutes. What's going to happen to the gas in your body by keeping your body slightly under pressure and relaxing for 10 extra minutes in the water?
Get a little additional off gas.
It's going to allow your body to off gas just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let's see. Easy deco and deep tools have cylinder soon. Yes, there are other apps out there. Absolutely, Mike. That's a good point. That there are deep deco, and there's a bunch of them out there that you can actually pay for. I like to suggest subsurface because it's free. I always figure you guys have spent enough just getting into this class. I don't want you to nickel and dime you with some other app that's going to cost you $20 or $19 or whatever it costs. Or I think I can't think of the name of it. The other deco software is $49 a year or something like that. So I try and give you free options to be able to use. Subsurface has just been a really good one.
So are you bringing your laptop to the dive spot, or if you're going to be on a trip, are you using that planner in advance, or are you taking your laptop out there?
When I go out on location, I do take my laptop, and because Subsurface is an actual app that I can download onto my computer, I actually utilize that, plan my dives for the day before I ever hit the dive site. So before I hit any dive site or dive boat, I have my dives in hand. I know what they're going to look like. I've taken the time to write them on my slates, or I've written them on a piece of paper so I can put them on my slates. But generally, the day the night before I do a dive, or the morning of a dive, I've written all my dive plans out before I ever go out to the site. So by the time I hit the site, I know what my dive plan is. There we go. I don't know if you can quite see it. That's from 125 feet, 25 minutes. So you can see this was a deco dive. And then I've written out my contingencies as well. We're going to go over contingencies here just a little bit anyway as well. So that is the basic idea. So I do want to recover half times one more time, and I rewrote it in a simpler way that most people can understand. And this is how it took me a while to figure this out, to write it down, but here's what I came up with. Our bodies are affected by the pressure and the gases in the air when we descend and dive. Our bodies have tissues that soak up the partial pressures of the gases we breathe and increase this at different rates as we descend. These tissues act like a sponge. When we descend, the gases in our tissues increase because of the higher pressure. Our body is made up of 16 theoretical different types of sponges that absorb these gases at different rates. This is where tissue half times come in. Tissue half times is a measure of how long it takes for the gas in our tissue to reduce by half. So think of it like this. If you have a bottle of soda, shake it up quickly, remove the lid, it explodes, the bubbles go everywhere. But if you have the same bottle of soda and you drink half of it, there is less effect when you shake it up and quickly remove the cap. You've decreased the bubble potential by half. Each time you have the soda in the bottle, you reduce the amount of the bubbles and increase the safety of not getting soda over your new white shirt. Now, Paul Burt was a scientist who studied how our bodies respond to pressure changes and include the partial pressure effect of oxygen on a diver. He helped discover that when a diver remains at depth, the gases in our tissues can cause problems when we ascend to the surface too quickly and we don't make a safety or a deco stop to allow the bubbles to settle and escape slowly. The gases that were absorbed by our tissues under pressure need time to gradually come out of our bodies. If we come up too fast, these gases can form bubbles and can cause DCS or the bends. Now, just like when you shake up the bottle of soda, then open it too quickly and bubbles go everywhere. So as divers, we use the half time within our tissues to reduce the amount and the size of the bubbles that will be released by using slower ascents. These gases are only seeds and escape very gradually through the course of ascending in the water column and remaining at a deco or safety stop. So that was how I came up with explaining it a little bit more simply.
No, that's great.
So, all right. So
I think they say it's like 5 half times is considered equilibrium.
7.
7? Okay.
So as we kind of go through this process, we also need to kind of understand the difference between normoxic and hypoxic gases. Now, the definition of a normoxic gas is a normal gas concentrate, but typically between 20 and 21% in atmospheric, and describing a breathing gas or a mixture that contains about 21%. Now, the definition of hypoxic gas is a state of excessive gas supply of O2 in tissue or organs, and is less than what it needs, the body needs for natural digestion of oxygen system throughout the system. So a hypoxic gas will be one that's lower than needed to sustain normal function or breathing as we go through this. Now, as we kind of look at this process of understanding normoxic and hypoxic gases, normoxic gas being 21%, as we reduce that out till we get to a 16%, that's when we start getting lethargic and we have a reduced mental process. At 12% oxygen, unconsciousness is likely to occur. And at 10%, write this one down because this will be on your test. 10% oxygen is the minimum partial pressure required to sustain life. Make sense?
Yep.
Now, as we start moving up in the column and we start moving up to superoxic gas mixes, 0.6 is the threshold where CNS oxygen toxicity can begin to occur. 1.4 is a recommended maximum partial pressure for diving. And at 1.6 is the point where a substantial risk of CNS oxygen toxicity can begin to occur.
Are you sharing anything, Ben?
I'm not. I'm just reading. And going through.
Sorry, you're frozen again, at least for me.
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Me. Stop.
Maybe that's the way you wish.
Let's try this again. There we go. Am I still frozen? You see me? You see me now?
See you. You're just smaller.
Yeah. Still frozen for me, but
Yeah, same here.
That's interesting. Because in the recording, it doesn't come up as frozen a lot of times as well. Can you see me now?
No, you're
Ben
still
is still
frozen.
frozen, but I can see everybody else.
Interesting. How about now? Can you see me now?
Still frozen, but bigger. Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
There he is.
Now you're-
There we go. Yay! So, interesting enough, there's a couple of people that we kind of come through on this. Paul Burt and Lorraine Smith were some of the leading pulmonary oxygen toxicists, are oxygen doctors that were really studying the idea of what was going on with oxygen toxicity and understanding what we're going through with this. And so as we kind of go through this process, Lorraine Smith is the first one to kind of discover and talk about where oxygen toxicity becomes an issue. And what he determined, I always want to say her, but it's actually him, is that pulmonary oxygen toxicity happens after 1.1 and up into 1.6. CNS toxicity begins happening at 1.6. Now, there's definitely a difference between where those toxicities happen and what happens in those toxicity ideas. The effects of oxygen toxicity on the diver are definitely a key and concern. So CNS toxicity happens exactly where we might think, in the brain, and it's in the nervous system. It's where we become the most concerned. Lorraine Smith first started talking about oxygen toxicity, though, in 1899. So must have been an absolute genius. And he noted that the severity increased with the partial pressure to the point of 1.6, and most of the pulmonary oxygen toxicity signs and symptoms were related to primarily the lungs. Make sense? After 1.6 is where we start getting into the Paul Burt effect, where it starts becoming a problem. Now, pulmonary oxygen toxicity starts off with a mild irritation in the trachea or the throat, and is made worse as you breathe deeper. A mild cough begins to occur, and followed by more severe symptoms as you breathe more of it in. If the exposure to oxygen is continued, the person is going to start noticing a tightness of the chest, difficulty breathing, and shortness of breath. And if the exposure continued long enough, the person dies from literally lack of oxygen. The progressive damage to the lungs eventually makes it impossible for the oxygen to get to the blood as it passes through the hemoglobin barrier. It overwhelms it. Now, interestingly enough, pulmonary oxygen toxicity, this is key to understand. This is not CNS, this is pulmonary. The time to onset symptoms is highly variable, but mostly 12 to 14 hours at 1.0 partial pressure, 6 to 12 hours at a 1.5 oxygen exposure, and 3 to 6 hours if that oxygen partial pressure is 2.0 or more before developing symptoms. So what I'm trying to tell you with this is, truthfully, pulmonary oxygen toxicity is actually very rare to start with. And in diving, it would take literally 6 hours at 200% before you start developing symptoms. Now, there's several ways to track pulmonary oxygen toxicity, but the most sensitive and accurate way to start being aware of pulmonary oxygen toxicity is the development of symptoms, that cough, difficulty breathing, chest pains. Now, there is a second technique to monitor this, and it's vital capacity. A reduction of up to 2% in vital capacity correlates with mild symptoms. A reduction of 10% correlates with severe symptoms. Now, these mild effects are completely reversible, and no permanent lung damage will occur generally. But it can take, depending upon the severity of it, can take 2 to 4 weeks to heal. So as we start talking about oxygen toxicity in diving, pulmonary oxygen toxicity is extremely rare. It's not something that most divers really need to ever be concerned about. The type of toxicity that you need to worry about is, however, CNS toxicity. And the signs and symptoms, anybody remember the acronym for CNS toxicity? Signs and symptoms?
Like vent or something? Or?
That's exactly right, convented. So the signs and symptoms of CNS toxicity are convented. Convulsions, visual distortion, ears for E, hearing abnormalities, N for nausea, T for twitching, I for irritability, and D for dizziness. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as we start thinking about oxygen toxicity in the CNS region, which of these signs and symptoms would you might notice in somebody else, Chase?
I mean, if it's bad enough, you could observe convulsions, but maybe like the twitching.
Mm-hmm. Twitching, convulsions, potentially irritability, unless your diet buddy is always a jackass, but generally not. Now, which signs and symptoms would you notice in yourself?
Visual distortion, tunnel vision, dizziness, irritability,
Ringing
twitching.
in the ears.
I guess all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I caution you guys dramatically on is, as you guys kind of go through this process, as you feel coming out of the water is how you should feel as you feel going in the water is how you should feel coming out of the water. One of the biggest problems, though, is what is it when you think you're sick, but you're not really sick? The hypochondria effect. There is a lot of divers out there that have the hypochondria effect of diving, and they try and determine their best gradient factor based upon how they felt after a dive. It's very common. And what they'll do is, and I've read these stories quite a few times, actually, where the diver said, well, I discovered that when I changed my gradient factor to 70%, I felt a lot better after my dives. And then down the road, I was feeling so good after the dives, I went ahead and raised it back up to 75%. And then I was still feeling great, and I felt 80% was great. And I dove a lot for 80%. But then all of a sudden, I had that dive, and I didn't feel good, so I pulled it back down to 75%. So be careful of that. It's a common thing. I hear it on the dive boats a lot. I changed my gradient factor based upon how I felt. The trick is to make sure you are honest with yourself and you're not falling prey to the hypochondria effect. It's one of the reasons I like having the O-dive, because there are times I come out of the water with a headache. Is it a sign and symptom of DCS?
No.
Could be. Could be not. Right? Could be that I'm just dehydrated.
Other things too.
Because I absolutely, I can tell you that I've come out of the water after 3 hours with a headache. Drank a bunch of water and I was just fine. The problem of diving 3 hours in the ocean is there's no water to drink. Now, one pro tip you can do, if you have a pouch, you can actually get a Capri Sun, and you can put a Capri Sun in your pouch, and about an hour and a half into your dive, you can absolutely stab that little booger and you can drink a Capri Sun while you're diving. So I did take a hydro pouch with me, a Camelback hydro pouch one time with me. That worked pretty decently, oddly enough. But you can do little things, and that's actually fairly common. I've seen other divers. Capri Sun's the most popular because it's got a nice flavor to it. The tangerine's the best, my opinion. Yep, it gives you some electrolytes, but you can absolutely pop that in a pocket and dive with it. It dives just fine. It doesn't seem to have any problems. But just be aware, as you go in is how you should feel coming out. But we talk about, I'm going to, if you guys don't mind, I'm also going to skip decompression illness because I feel like we covered that fairly in depth in our last class. Nitronarcosis, we covered that in our last class, to deep depth as well. Let's see. If you guys wouldn't mind, I would like to return and come back to equivalent narcotic depth, but you guys are going to have to remind me. I do want to cover that, but I don't want to cover it tonight if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Let's see. There's other stuff we're covering in the other class that I'd like to save for the other class overall. So I'm going to jump out of this, and we're going to jump into more of the physicalness of diving tech, if you guys don't mind. That way we can save some of the cool stuff for our next class. Now, some of the key things to diving tech is the equipment. Now, one of the biggest things with equipment, Josh, what's one of the things that you notice when you see me dive versus newbie divers with my equipment?
I mean, redundancy.
Say again?
Redundancy.
Absolutely. That's a big thing. How about danglies and streamlining?
You're very squared away. Yeah, I was going to say, you don't really have other people. They like to have it on display. You like to have it all tucked in a pocket.
Tucked away. So everything you see is proper feeding. It's streamlined. Is any of the stuff that I carry difficult to use or complicated? David, you've dove a lot with me.
I'm trying to think, and I can't think of anything that's super complicated. I mean, you have to know where it is, because a lot of times you'll have things clipped like back behind your back or out of view, like normal view. But as long as you know where it is, I think that's the biggest complication you'll ever have, is because everything it's all secured with double enders, so it's super easy to get clipped and unclipped, and you don't have to worry about it like falling out of a pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you'll find when you dive with me as well is I'm very consistent. In my left pocket, you'll always find a spare mask. You'll usually find a lift bag, a secondary lift source, and you'll usually find a cutting tool in my left pocket. In my right pocket, you'll always find an SMB. You'll always find a reel, and you'll usually find a cutting utensil in that as well. That's a typical. Guess what you'll find in my wife's left pocket of her dry suit?
Capri Sun.
Snickers.
No, I'm the one who carries the Capri Sun. You'll find a spare mask. Usually you'll find a additional lift source and a cutting tool. In her right pocket, you're going to find an SMB and a reel and a cutting device. We do things very consistently across the board. I know where her stuff's at. She knows what my stuff is. And what you'll find in tech diving, the setup is fairly consistent across most tech divers. We as a group, magically as a whole, through GUI, IANTD, TDI, and SSI, have all kind of come together as a rule, and we've decided that on our left pocket is where we keep our mask. It's the least convenient place to grab something, and it's because it's the least used thing we need. And I can tell you, in my 3,000 whatever plus dives, I've only broken one mask. And I've only had one diver break a mask where I had to offer him one of mine. So in all those dives, I've had that happen twice. So, but how many times in tech diving, have I used a reel and a spool?
Every time.
Every time. Yeah, absolutely. So I keep in my right pocket because it's more convenient for me to get to. I also keep a reel and a spool in redundancy on my rear D-ring as well, which is a very common place to keep one. So my spare is in my pocket. My primary is on my rear D-ring clipped on. Very nice. So what you'll find is there's a consistency in what we do as we go through this process. We make sure that we match equipment to the dive objectives as well. That I'm not carrying anything I don't need or might not need. I'm making sure that I'm properly fit to what I'm using. That my crotch strap is not extremely loose. That my D-ring on my crotch strap hasn't slid down till it's between my legs. It's firmly planted right at my tailbone, and that it's all streamlined, because the more crap you have hanging off, the more crap you have the ability that's going to grab something that you don't want it to grab. If you're trying to go through a porthole in a ship, or you're around something, it's going to, if it can grab onto something, it will. The other thing about streamlining as well is the more streamlined you are, the less gas you'll use. The easier it is to go through the water column. It's one of the reasons there, Chase, that my sack rate on Saturday averaged between 9 and 10. I had a really high sack rate on Saturday, so I was fairly embarrassed. I was 9.7. It was my average sack rate between the 4 dives that I did. So that was very high for me. I was not pleased with that, but overall, it's a decent sack rate. But the reason I'm in that is because I'm in position. I've got a good hover. I'm very relaxed to the process. You guys all saw me do that on Saturday quite a few times, but I'm also very streamlined. So I've got that very sexy torpedo going on, right? There's a reason that we don't strap a spare tire on the side of a submarine, right? Because we want it to be able to sleek through the water, right? They do that in the Mexican Navy, but not in the U.S. Navy, luckily. So in the screen doors. So as we think about the tech diving, we want to think about how our kit is presented. It's not that we're trying to look good. It's that we're trying to streamline this to simplicity, match to our objectives, and ease of use. I know how I can get to it. I know where it's at, and it's pretty consistent. You'll find most of the guys I dive with that have dive pockets, when we do the big dives, they have an SMB reel in that right pocket, and they have a spare mask and some tools in the left pocket. I know this. If there's an emergency, I know where I can go to get their tools if I need them. And I can see their spare SMB usually on their butt. Or if they're driving side mount, there's also those 2 wing D-rings as well that are pretty common to use. But it's about streamlining it and making it easy. The other thing about it is consistency. Through this process, I do the same thing over and over again. I don't decide one day I'm going to put my mask in the right pocket overall. So anytime I do make a change in tech diving, and I encourage this, is that you make one change at a time. Test the equipment before critical dives and consider the team concept on this. As we're going through this process, you guys have a pretty good idea where my stuff is. You can see it, you know what's going on. David, you pointed this out very quickly, that you know where it's at, and you kind of know how I operate at this well. David, how many times have you seen me change the position of any of my equipment?
Pretty often.
You see me change?
But so I say pretty often, but it's pretty often each time you get a new piece of equipment, because I've also seen you get a lot of new equipment, and you'll move it around till you find a place that you like it. So your kit itself, once you find a place that you love, stays pretty consistent, but you work to find what works best for you, if that makes sense.
But it's still in about the same place. I am blessed that I do go through a lot of equipment, but it's also because I work for a dive shop, so that helps quite a bit. But I also test the equipment as well. So you guys have all seen me take my new gear into the pool, and I test it before critical dives. I don't all of a sudden one day show up with a new computer. Like when I got the Apex, I put 5 pool dives on that Apex before I ever took it to open water. When I did take it to open water, I paired it with a computer that I've been using for years, and I had it as my backup secondary. So I had a primary computer that I knew I was comfortable with, and then I added the second computer so I could understand how it worked against what I understood and what I knew. So test your stuff before critical dives. Don't just jump in the water and say, okay, today I'm going to learn how to dive twin sets with 4 Deco bottles. How do I figure this out? Let's just jump into and do a 150-foot dive. It doesn't work that way. It's not a good idea. I see people do it. I absolutely see people do it. I've seen a tech instructor take new students out and brand it that had never dove twin sets before and decided to jump them off a boat to 150-foot depth. Not the best situation. So test your equipment and then consider the team considerations. Is there something I can carry that could potentially help a team member? So think about that as you start putting this kind of stuff together. That's the considerations you want to put together. And then you want to make sure that you're working with reliable and redundant equipment, something that's not going to break. Now, how do you think the role of equipment familiarity might help prevent an accident, Josh?
Well, I mean, in an emergency, you know where it is, so you can get to it quick.
How about redundancy?
Yeah, I mean, redundancy. If you lose something or something breaks, you have a backup.
Absolutely. One of my favorite examples of pissed off that redundancy. Nikki and I were doing a deco dive, and we both were twin sets, and I had a big deco cylinder with 60% on our, and we're diving a heavy drift in Florida. We started at 150 feet, and they just dumped Lake Okeechobee, so we only had 45, 50 feet of viz. The instructor came by and said, "Hey, I don't like to put my extra SMB where you've got it. I like to put it on my pony bottle because it's easy to get to." Made the mistake. It's the only time I've changed anything on a dive boat. And I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and I had 2 SMBs and 2 reels. I'll go ahead and put my spare SMB and my spare reel on my deco bottle. We'll try it. He says, try it. Why not? I found out later he carried 3 SMBs and 3 reels, which made it much more sense when this happened. So Nikki and I are diving along with this instructor, and it's time to go ahead and run the plan. And it was my turn to launch the SMB. The problem with that is about 5 minutes prior, we'd done a drill where we'd gone ahead and switched deco bottles between us. So I'd switched my deco bottle with Nikki. Nikki had my deco bottle, she had mine. So it was time to launch that SMB. I grabbed my primary SMB, no problem at all. I went ahead and it was on a spool. I got it out, got the launch going. It got tangled up in the spool. My finger was stuck in it. It pulled me about 30, 40 feet up and 30, 40 feet ahead. And as this is continuing to pull me to the surface and I can't get loose of it, I grabbed my knife, I cut it, and I set that SMB free. I was like, you go away, buddy. And then clipped my reel to it. But the problem is by this point, I'd gotten far enough above and ahead of my instructor and Nikki at the time that I watched where the current turned. The current literally went straight and made a 90. It was a break current. It was really neat. And so they made the left. I kept going straight, and I lost them completely. And the current was clipping on 2-3 knots an hour. There was no catching back up to them. And I thought, no problem. I'll go ahead and run my deco plan. And I'll go ahead and launch my spare SMB. So I reached over to find my spare SMB. It was gone. Nikki had it. I was definitely not a happy camper at this moment, and a little concerned at this point, thinking, will the boat be able to find me? Because I need to launch my SMB so the boat can find my stupid butt. It was a cloudy day too, so I was worried, looking at a Navy SEAL on black water, that it was going to be the easiest to find me. Luckily, we were only 10 miles off of shore, and I thought, well, I guess I could always swim back to shore. It's going to take me a while, but at least I'll be able to see shore. But luckily, I came to a certain point. I happened to look downstream a little bit, and I spotted over there was another diver from our boat that had been hunting on a rebreather. And so we were able to buddy up. And when I came over, I told him, I says, I need to run my deco. And he says, launch. And I said, can't launch. SMB gone. And he's like, oh, okay. And so he launched his SMB. But A, don't change your stuff just before. And B, always make sure you have redundancy to whatever you're doing. I've actually had to cut 2 SMBs free for tangles as well. So knowing where your knife is, I keep a knife on my wrist. I just pull the knife off and just cut and send that bad boy to the surface. Oddly enough, I write my name on my SMBs in big 3-inch letters with my phone number. I got both those SMBs back. So they're both lucky SMBs.
Nice.
So as a couple of fun pro tips on there for you. So the role of your equipment is that you need to be familiar with it, practice with it, and make sure you have a redundant equipment. With technical diving, what happens if your mask breaks? Do you have a spare mask? What happens if you have to cut free an SMB? What happens if there's an emergency? You launch one SMB. We have a deal with every boat captain we go on and every tech dive we go on. If you see one SMB by itself, everything's fine. That's where we're coming up. If you see 2 SMBs side by side, there's a problem called the Coast Guard. Absolutely. That is, and our plan is if there's an emergency, say I got caught in a porthole of a ship and I couldn't get out. I was wedged into something. Nikki can launch one SMB right on a slate, diver trapped, put it on her slate, send it to the surface on the second SMB. So when the boat comes, they can pull the SMBs, read the note. Oh my God. In fact, if you watch the movie Dave Not Coming Back, it's free on Netflix. It's definitely worth it. Mike, don't let your wife watch it. Chase, don't let your wife watch it. It's just not to your advantage. David and Josh, you guys let your girlfriends watch it. They'll stop dating you. Say again?
I said I started watching that. You can watch it on YouTube too, I think.
It's free. Yeah, free on YouTube. Great movie. But that was one of the things that when Dave had the problem, they and wasn't coming back, that was the message. Dave not coming back. They put it on a slate, sent it to the first set of safety divers. The first set of safety divers sent it to the second set of safety divers, and the second set took it to the surface. So they were able to take this message up. So having a slate is definitely to your advantage as well. So make sure you're thinking about safety. What can I do to make sure that I am completely safe through the process, that I'm able to go through this process and be safe? We talked about gas capacities in our other class. We talked about figuring out gas volume. So it's great. There's a lot of the stuff we covered. I love it. You guys are in my science and diving class are just crushing it, by the way. Overall, gear for utilizing in tech diving, definitely one of the things. So David, you're in well, David and Mike, you're both into piloting and all that stuff. And have you noticed that if you spend more on computer stuff for your plane, you get nicer stuff?
Yeah, lasts longer.
Yeah, as a rule.
It provides better use than just using a lensatic compass, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Same thing with regulators. The nicer you spend, the generally, and the nicer the regulator you get, you're going to get some advantages. And some of them, you got to remember, this is life support equipment. So the nicer the regulator you get, you're definitely going to get a lower work of breathing because they're going to be balanced and they're going to give you more gas to the process. They're also going to generally be better balanced and more durable, so that as you get to these colder depths, because magically what's going to happen is the ocean's generally not going to get warmer. And the lake is definitely not going to get warmer, except for a few odd cases when you get deeper. So you're going to definitely have to be concerned more about regulator freezing and icing. So making sure you have a well-balanced and cold rated regulator is definitely to your advantage. It's going to be to your advantage. I did the first time I dove Firehole River. Firehole's not very deep. It's 30 feet at the deepest point. But when you go in, you're going into a class 4 rapid. Well, it starts out at class 1 rapid, and it very quickly upgrades to a class 4 to 4.5 rapid. And what you do is you go around this rock, and you get from the 0 rapid to 1 rapid to 2 to 3, and you climb because you can't swim it. You climb, grabbing rocks and pulling yourself to a wall, and the wall is probably 4.5, 5 feet tall, and there's a chute that you crawl through to get to the next wall. But the problem is the first time I did it, I didn't have a nice balanced regulator that was designed for heavy breathing. When I finally got to climb my ass to that wall, I had to wait there for 5 or 6 minutes while I caught my breath, and I had a hard time getting enough air so I could catch my breath. Because it was not balanced, it wouldn't keep up with the amount of respiration that I had going. I tried to go up through the chute, and I got to the next wall. When I got to the 4.5 rapids, I was done. I felt like I was going to pass out because I couldn't get enough air in my lungs. I popped over the wall. I let it flush me downstream, and I got to the surface as quickly as I could. And when I got to the surface, I was panting, trying to catch my breath. A good regulator
water that you were climbing.
Yeah, it was all underwater. You climb under a class 4.5 rapid. Yeah, it's a stupid amount of fun, but it's definitely not for the faint of heart. So be aware as you're getting the right gear, you want to make sure you're thinking about, what am I going to do with it? It's going to save my life. Maybe I should get a balanced, sealed, and cold water rated regulator. There's a lot of different regulators on the market. You guys all kind of know my suggestions on this. I like the Hollis 200LX with the DCX regulator or first stage, or the 500 LE is another nice one with the DCX first stage as well. I prefer the DCX first stage. It's more set up for technical diving because it has a 5th port. I also like the Apex 50 XTX 50 first and second. It's a great setup regulator. I also dive the Atomic M1s. It's one of my lesser favorites, but it's a good regulator set. David, that's what you were diving today with my twin sets as well. So a good quality, balanced, and sealed regulator is definitely to your advantage.
Do you recommend having the same regulator when you're running a twin set? Like if you're running side mount, would you run the same regulator on both, or does it matter too much?
No. Once you set up a rig set to what you need, you don't want to take a wrench to it. All you're adding, every time you take a wrench to your rig set, you're asking for problems. So I have a separate set of regulators just for twin sets. I have a separate regulator sets just for side mount. The nice thing is your deco bottle, a deco bottle in side mount and a deco bottle in twin sets is the same setup. So I've got deco regulator sets for just my deco bottles. And then everybody on here will tell you I have a regulator set just for teaching. I have a regulator set for cold water diving without a full face mask. And then I have a regulator set up just for full face mask.
I think he meant from left to right when diving side mount.
I did mean, but so on would you have a matching one like the Hollis 200 LX you'd have for both like the right and left, or?
Correct. I like matching across the board so that I'm even across.
Perfect. Thanks.
Absolutely. I use the 200 LXs for my side mount. I use the Atomic M1s for my twin sets. And then I've got Apex XTX 50s for my single tank back mounts. For the 3 different setups I use on those. And then I use F8s, Ziegel F8s for decos. So those are just more leftover regulators that I've rebuilt for that. I think we lost Mike. Mike, are you still there?
Can you guys hear me at all?
I can hear you. Yeah, you're just frozen. That's all. No big deal.
Yeah,
so
everything's frozen on mine. So.
Oh, gotcha. No worries. It happens. It's got to be the software. Anyway, so that's kind of my pitch on regulators. Buoyancy compensators, you want to make sure you're using a technical based setup for this. As we're moving out of now, Chase is kind of you have a tech setup anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But decompression procedures is the last point where you can use a recreational setup as long as it can hold a deco bottle. But as you start moving up, you guys will start noticing that when you start moving into a technical setup like a backplate and wing, you're able to accommodate a wider mission of object through this process. We're moving past that point where we no longer need training wheels and we don't need a jacket BC to squeeze us into submission and make us feel special. We're moving into a different dynamic. The nice thing with the backplate and wing, though, is that it will accommodate a single tank. You can take the wing off and it will accommodate a twin set as well. So Chase, your ST35, we can take that wing off. I can put a different wing on it and you can run that same plate for twin sets.
Oh, awesome.
In fact, oddly enough, David was running using my DT50, which is the same back plate as you have. It's just a different strap. On my DT50, it's a single web, whereas the ST Elite has a 3-piece harness on it instead, but it's same plate. So
you got the better harness though.
Say again. say again.
Oh, I think he's.
I said yeah, but he got the better harness though.
Oh,
that one piece is a chore.
It's more chore. It's definitely once it's set up, you leave it alone. But the nice thing with what you did with the backplate and wing is it'll grow with you. You'll never outgrow it.
No.
Now, one of the things that there's a big controversy on this, and you have to make your own decision on this. As we start going into technical diving, one of the things, the question is do I put a pod on everything, or do I use a steam gauge, a standard SPG?
Or
what do you think, guys?
Both.
Well, I think there is improved accuracy on a pod. However, the reliability of a simple board-on tube SPG is less prone to failure. So it's, I don't know. I watched a great interview by the two guys that do the dive podcast.
Dive Talk, sure. Gus and Woody.
Yeah, those two. And they were asking a bunch of people at this big dive conference, these real world renowned deep tech divers, do they use an SPG, a pod, or both? And it was all over the map. I mean, there was no consistency. Some used one, some used the other, and some used both. So I don't know. Like, I like the redundancy of having one of each, but it adds dangly shit. So there's a trade-off there.
Absolutely. It depends on the case for me. Okay. You have to make your own decision when it comes to this. When it comes to twin sets or ice diving, anytime I'm in a shouldn't say anytime, but when I'm in a critical situation like that, I typically run both, except for side mount. With side mount, I only run pods because it's all about the streamline effect for me with side mount. Because I'm going to be taking stuff off and squeezing it through places, adding to, because of the logistics of it. With side mount, what you'll find is there's going to be a pod will come down, and if you add an SPG, it comes up and out, and it becomes a catch hazard. So when it comes to side mount, I only run pods. They're very reliable. I've never really had a big issue with them on any setup. So it's never been a big problem for me. But with twin sets, because it's an easier way it's simpler and there's less danger in doing it, what you'll generally find with twin sets is I will run both. But the other advantage and reason I run both is what happens if I have a mechanical failure on my left and my pod is on my left.
You have no indication.
Turn off and isolate, but I still have SPG for one side. If it happens on my right, that's my SPG. I can turn that side off and I still have pod for my left. So I have the ability to monitor each tank in an emergency. Okay. Now, kind of a fun story for you. I was testing a new pod for the Apex that appeared to work but did not. And I was diving Yellowstone Lake, and I had two tanks. We swam out a quarter of a mile, and I descended down, and one of my pods didn't work at all. So all I was able to do is monitor gas on my left side, but not my right side. So because it was a simple dive, what I did and chose to do is instead of calling the dive is I dove completely for my right side only until I got to the point of zero gas. And once I got to the point where I was having a hard draw on the gas, I went ahead and switched to my left tank that I knew had 3,000 PSI in it. And it was a known entity. So even if I'd gotten into deco, I still had an idea of how much gas I had, at least on one side. So that was my solution. It's not the best solution. But it was a solution and it was able. I had something similar happen in Hawaii where I had a leaky hose. So what I did is I turned the tank off on my right and I dove the left tank until it got down to 1,000 PSI. And then I switched over to my right tank and dove it down to 1,000 PSI. And that gave me 1,000 PSI of, I didn't go into deco and I was very careful not to, but it gave me 1,000 PSI of reserve. And then I came extra shallow and close to shore and I dove off the extra 500 and then came to the surface. But that was my solution to that as well. So think about what you're going to do and be safe through the process, but make your decision on what you feel is best. In tech diving, you're going to find that cold is going to be a big factor for you. So as you start doing this, there's no worse thing than being cold and wet and forced to sit in position for a long period of time. It sucks. 2 weeks ago, I was diving dry suit, and Nikki and I were out, and we did a 90-minute dive in Ryrie. And we went out deep. I'd gotten sweaty, and my undergarments were wet, and I got cold. And when I came up to the deco stop, we had 27 minutes where I got to sit at the deco stop and shiver. It was definitely not fun. So be aware, as you go down, you're going to get cold. Hypothermia is cumulative. So as you prepare for this, don't forget to prepare with thermal regulation as well. If you're going to be doing a long dive in Florida at 150 feet, a 3 mil wetsuit is not going to cut it. You're going to be getting down to 70 degrees, 65, 68 degrees Most like it's 150 feet in Florida. It's generally about 70 degrees, just so you know. But 70 degrees for 2 hours, it will definitely cut you down. Day one, it may not, but day 4, it definitely will. I spent 4 days at the Blue Grotto diving, and it's 72 degrees constant. Day 1, I was at a 5 mil. I was like, woo, this is nice. No hood. Woo. Day 2, I was like, this water's a little on the chilly side, but no big deal. Woo, still good. Day 3, I was like, oh, this water's a little chilly. Day 4, I was shivering. So it's cumulative. So be aware. Be prepared with a proper amount of exposure protection. You'll find a lot of guys that do dive long tech in Florida wear dry suits. Absolutely. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing better than coming out of the cold water in January where there's a cold breeze across the ocean and being able to open up your dry suit and be completely dry. So now be aware as you're doing those deeper dives and you're wearing that more exposure protection, as you guys have all learned, they are buoyant. So be aware of the buoyancy characteristics of what you're dealing. Because the last thing you want to do, and I've had this happen, where I've misjudged my buoyancy factor diving 4 aluminums. They were plenty heavy. 4 aluminums are plenty heavy at the beginning of a dive. At the end of the dive, because I mean, think about it. 4 aluminums, that's 4 times 3 pounds negative. That's 12 pounds negative, no big deal. But when they become 4 pounds positive at the end of the dive, that's 4 times 4, that's 16 pounds positive. If you haven't prepared for 16 pounds positive, it could be a problem. For me, it could have been a problem. I held onto a big rock and did my deco. I have done that for not taking into account the positive buoyancy shift. So just be aware. As we start getting into deco, you guys really get a better kind of understanding of this because we dive Ryrie a lot in the lakes. But having a light is definitely a big key to diving around here. But even still, if you're diving 150 feet in the ocean, Josh, what'd you notice when you were diving 70 feet in Hawaii? Was the light kind of neat?
Was it what?
Was the light kind of handy?
Yeah, no, a light's really handy, especially, I mean, it restores color, but you can also look in crevices and stuff.
Absolutely. It returns the color. Make sure that as you're going through this process, you're carrying all the extra stuff as well. I encourage cutting devices, reels and spools, DSMBs, a reef hook. If you're going to be diving a current and you're doing a tech dive, a reef hook is not a bad idea. If you want to stop and see something and you don't want to have to worry about the effort of kicking to stay there and you don't want to touch the coral, a nice little reef hook to lock into something is definitely a nice way to go. I always encourage a compass because you guys are advanced divers and taking this course. I fully expect that you'll be able to navigate your way out to where we're going and navigate your way back. So if I'm having to navigate for you, we have a different discussion we're going to have. Just be aware. I guess this is probably as good a time as any to discuss this. You guys are no longer beginning divers. I don't treat this course as if you guys are fresh out of open water. I shouldn't have to, right? I treat you guys at this point as if you're big kid divers wearing big kid scuba gear that you've used big kid money to pay for and that you have big kid experience, okay? So I really want you guys to understand at this point, I'm more of a dive buddy than I am a dive instructor when we dive. Because when we go out to open water, my job is to do 2 things. To kind of do a gentle watch over everybody to make sure that you're all fairly safe and to be a gremlin. As David will tell you, one of my favorite things in the world to be is a gremlin. I love being a gremlin. Nothing makes me happier than being a gremlin. So my job is to present problems and see how you solve them. So my promise to you guys is this. David, have you ever seen me touch a diver during a open water dive in an unsafe way?
Nope.
You ever ripped a mask off, turned air off, sold a fin, done weird stuff like that?
Not that I've seen.
Okay. I don't do that. That is not my thing. I don't do that. I have played games with David, but never in that way. And I've never done that in open water either. You have to admit that. I have turned his air off the pool just to be funny. That was That was freaking hilarious, man. Because he started to the surface, and I turned it right back on real quick. He's like, "Oh, I got air," and then he came back down. I turned it back off, and he's like, he started hitting the surface. I turned it back on.
The first time I didn't see him behind me, so I was just like, that was weird. Like, because it hadn't quite cut out. It was just like just starting to get hard to breathe, and I was like, that's weird. Like, so I kind of started flailing around, and he had already had it back on, and the second time I caught him, and I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. Okay.
I will do that in the pool, but I will never do that in open water. So my job is, and I'm going to tell you right now, my job is to be a gremlin and to task load you into stress. But I will not do anything where I don't have control, where I can't get you to safety and I can't control the situation. Okay. So my job is to be a gremlin. And David will tell you that I am pretty decent at being a gremlin, and I have a good ability to task load you to the point of stress. So be aware that that's going to happen. But that's my job, is to not be, I'm not there to hold your hand anymore. You guys are big kids. I'll tell you where to go. I'm going to give you a list of skills that need to be accomplished, and we're going to have a dive plan ahead of time. So I need you guys to follow the dive plan and accomplish the skills. You guys are all big kids at this point and should be able to handle all that on your own. I will find cool things that will stress you out. So that's kind of the plan. Just heads up, is you guys will be in buddy teams. I will pair you guys up in as buddies, and your buddy there is your buddy. I'm like, again, there just to be the kind of the magic shepherd and your gremlin, your friendly neighborhood gremlin. That's my job. So any questions on that or any concerns?
Can you talk to us a bit about the skills we'll be expected to do? I've been trying to find the standards, but I don't have the pro side of the XR manual, so I can't actually see what skills are part of the class.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. Give me a moment. I'll actually pull up all of them. Take me just a moment. Okay. Let's see. I've got I left my wet notes in the car. I hope I left them in the car.
Yeah. I expect they'll be different between twin sets and side mount and all that stuff, but
oddly enough, no.
Really?
They're pretty much the same skills.
Gotcha.
See. Yeah, remember, you're diving a tech setup, so diving instruction, extended range. Q, there we are. There are two cue cards for this. There's the deco procedures, which is the first set. Let's see, open water. All right. So, and deco procedures for group 1 that includes chase. I will expect to see equipment assembly, dive plan review, and pre-dive checks. Let's see. I'll expect to see a buoyancy check with total diving system. I'll expect to see an S drill, a controlled descent, a stage removal and replace. You will all have a stage bottle, or otherwise known as a deco bottle, right? Chase, what's the difference between a pony bottle, a stage bottle, and a deco bottle?
I'm going to have to get back to you on that.
David, what's the difference between those three?
A pony bottle is a redundant bottle of the same gas you're using on your back that you carry. Typically, if you're going to do solo diving, so that you have a redundant system for the system you have. A stage bottle is a different blend of gas, typically left behind at certain stages that you'll use them on your way back. And a deco bottle is a bottle of gas that you'll use for your deco stop, typically of a higher oxygen concentration than your back gas.
You're in the realm. How about this? So a pony bottle is an emergency bottle, and it can be up to whatever deco blend that you want to use. It could be the same as you're out of the back. I encourage using it. If you're going to use a pony bottle, that you use at least a 40% blend in your pony bottle. A pony bottle is only for emergencies, not for your dive. If there's a gas loss, you'll use a pony bottle. If you're or you run out of gas, you'll use a pony bottle. Now, the thing about it is, if I go to a pony bottle and my emergency gas, what's the next thing I'm going to do? Surface, right? If I've had a catastrophic gas failure, I'm certainly not going to continue to dive. Or I've run out of gas because I was an idiot, I'm going to go ahead and surface. Now, wouldn't it be to my advantage to have at least a 40% blend in that pony bottle?
Yeah. As long as you're not concerned about max operating depth, I suppose.
Well, if I'm carrying a pony bottle, I'm probably not doing a deco dive, right? I'm probably recreational. Right,
but you'll still have a mod for the 40%.
But if I'm at 130 feet, I have a catastrophic gas failure, and I'm running a 40% blend, and I start to the surface, will I be breathing a 40% blend long enough where it becomes an issue for CNS or pulmonary toxicity?
No.
Oh, I got you.
Nope. Because I can breathe 40% up to 82.5 feet, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll hit that fairly quickly. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So would it be to my advantage to have at least a 40% blend of nitrox in a pony bottle?
Probably.
Absolutely. I'm going to be off gassing a lot faster through an accelerated deco that we have already talked about. So that'd be my encouragement. You can do you, right? As long as it's any gas that you can use as an emergency. And if it's an emergency, I'm going to go ahead and start heading to the surface anyway. And on a 30 to 40 foot cubic foot tank, I'm going to have a lot of spare gas, and it's going to be plenty to get to me to surface as well. But if I've got it at a higher blend, it's going to increase my safety margin. In my pony bottles, I'll tell you right now, I keep 55% in if I'm just running a pony bottle for accelerate. So it's a massive accelerated deco, and I can get to the surface and I can blow that nitrogen off very quickly. Increases my safety margin dramatically, even if I had to hand it to somebody. So a deco bottle is just an additional gas that I carry in case of emergency. Okay.
You mean
a deco bottle is an additional gas I carry for accelerated decompression that'll be a much higher percentage of oxygen than what I've currently got on my back gas or my travel gas. Now, here's where it gets confusing. A stage bottle can be a pony bottle, and a stage bottle can be a deco bottle. It could be either, right? A stage bottle simply means that I've got a bottle of a gas that I'm going to leave somewhere that I can come back and get. A common stage bottle that I see a lot in recreational diving is when they're using a John line. For example, the Lady Luck is at 125 feet to the deck, 142 feet to the sand. It's a 390 foot barge that sits down there, right? It's not, and there's a John line because it's a heavy current at the Lady Luck. It's not uncommon for the dive boat to drop down and leave a stage bottle at 20 feet. So if somebody comes up and they happen to have gotten into deco for whatever, because they were dumb or they were low on gas, as they're doing their deco stop, they have the ability to switch over to the emergency stage bottle. It's exactly what it sounds. It's a staged bottle of something. Cave divers will typically use a stage bottle as an additional gas or a deco blend for them as they're exiting a cave. Typically, it'll be a deco blend of some kind. So it's all in the name. A stage bottle is something we stage in a place for our use, either in case of or to extend our dive. So we don't have to carry as much gas with us. That's why cave divers do it. Instead of carrying six bottles into a cave, what they'll do is they'll have 2 bottles that they've got set up as deco bottles that are stages that they'll leave as they go along, like a trail of breadcrumbs. So when they get to the farthest point, they'll be down to 2 bottles. And they'll go as deep as they can, and they'll turn, they'll come back, and they'll pick up one of the bottles they left, and they'll use that. And then they'll pick up another bottle as they come back, and they'll pick up another bottle as they come back. Till eventually they get back. If they've got 6 bottles when they go in, they'll eventually get back to 6 bottles. So that's what a stage bottle is a bottle we can leave somewhere. Now, as a decompression and technical diver, our tanks that we set up as deco bottles are removable easily so that we can either stage them or hand them off as needed, but it gives us an option. So we're going to have to remove and replace our stage / deco bottle underwater. Easy enough. We're going to be down at 90 feet. I'm going to tell you to go ahead and set down your deco. Okay. That's going to be your sign and symptom. You're literally going to see you set down your deco. Good. Easy enough to do. Here's what it looks like. I'll even show you how to do it. You're going to reach over. If you have a bungee on it, you're going to unbungee it, David. If you're running side mount, you won't have a bungee on it. It'll be right here. Okay. Lean left, Rich right. You guys are only going to have one stage bottle, so it's going to be lean left. So you're going to have your stage bottle on your left-hand side below your primary tank. If you're in side mount, if you're in twin sets, it's going to be bunged up here. So remove your bungee, David, or if you're not David, you're going to reach down. You're going to find your lower clip and your upper clip. You're going to unclip it, and you're going to put it straight out. You're going to set it down. Now, Mike, as you're setting this tank down, what's going to happen to your buoyancy?
You're at 90 feet. You're going to be less buoyant. Sorry, more buoyant.
More buoyant, exactly. So as you're breathing, what should you do?
Exhale.
Exhale, absolutely. Exhale, and then that gives you a second or two to reach over and dump a little gas. You don't have shouldn't have to. If you're dumping a 40-pound bottle, you shouldn't have to dump a ton, but you're going to want to dump a little bit to remain neutrally buoyant. What I'm going to ask you to do, once you set that down, I want you to swim around the group, come back to your stage bottle, and you're going to pick that up. Now, Chase, you're picking up this bottle. What's going to happen to your buoyancy as you pick up this bottle?
As I pick up that bottle, I'm going to become more buoyant, or negatively buoyant. Sorry.
Less buoyant, right? So What are you going to do with your breath?
I'm going to breathe in, not hold my breath, but I'm going to breathe in.
You're going to start at the bottom of your breath. Breathe in as you pick it up. Lower clip, upper clip. Go ahead and hit your buoyancy, your LP hose, and add just a little bit of gas so that you remain in trim, nicely buoyant.
Okay.
Easy enough. Once you've got it in position, you're good to go. If you're David and you have a bungee, you're going to, after you get it clipped and you're buoyant, just reach over and re-bungee it in so it's nice and tight to you.
And I'll be doing this in twin sets. Is that right?
Again?
Did you say that I'll be doing this in a twin set?
You'll be doing this in single tank.
Okay.
Josh and Mike are side mount. David is in twin sets, and you're in single tank because you're only going through day one with us on this.
Yes.
Day one dives. So that's the first skill. Simple enough. We're going to go through and we're going to remove and replace a deco bottle. Simple enough. Next, we're going to go through an estrill. Now, Chase, your estrill is going to look slightly different. And we're going to do your estrill at a lighter depth, a lower depth. But what you're going to do is you're going to need to reach back, and you're going to need to make sure that first off your deco bottle is on. You're going to turn your deco bottle on, so you can do this before we go down or once we come back up. You're going to reach down. You're going to turn that deco bottle on. You're going to give it a little puff to make sure it's actually working. You're going to reach back. And you're going to find your primary bottle, and you're going to turn it off. You're going to run out of gas. No gas. You're going to take your deco bottle and you're going to put it in. You're going to give me the okay. Once you've given me the okay, you're going to reach back, turn that back on, find your primary regulator. You're going to give it a puff, and you're going to switch back. Give me the okay. You're going to restow your deco bottle hose, and you're going to turn your deco bottle back off.
Okay.
Give me the okay. That's going to be your estrill. Mike and Josh, your estrill is going to be slightly different. I'm going to tell you, estrill, what you're going to do is you're going to reach down, you're going to find your other regulator from your right tank, because you should be on your left tank at this point. You're going to find it, and you're going to give it one quick puff to make sure it's operating. Once you've given it one quick puff to make sure it's operating, you're going to reach down to your left-hand side. You're going to find the valve, you're going to turn it off. All of a sudden, you're going to be out of gas. You're going to go ahead and take that regulator out. You're going to take your secondary regulator, put it back in and clear it. You're going to turn that gas back on, and you're going to give me the okay. Once you've given it okay, give it a puff from your secondary, and you can give the puff from the secondary, and then give me the okay as well. It's not a hard thing. This is something I added specifically. Once you've got the okay on that side, you're going to reach down and do the exact same opposite thing on the other side. You're going to turn the gas off. All of a sudden, the gas is gone. Take it off. Put your other one back in. Turn it back on. Give it a puff. Give me the okay. I need to see you turn the gas off. Breathe it down. Switch regulators, and then turn the gas back on. Go to the other side. Turn the gas off. Breathe it down to 0. Switch regulators, and turn the gas back on. And check throughout the process. David, your estriol is exactly the same.
So are we not doing the deco bottle then? We're not doing all 3 bottles.
You're not. Just for the estriol, all I need to see is your primary bottles.
Okay.
Chase only has 1 bottle on his back, so he has to go to his deco bottle.
Sure.
I'm going to need to see gas sharing. Simple enough. I'm out of gas. Share. If you are the one, what should be happening if you're on twin sets, you should be on your long hose already at this point. And if you're on a single tank, you should be on your long hose already. What you're going to do is you're going to take that big breath. You're going to take the hose and you're going to take it by grabbing with one hand as close to the second stage as you possibly can. The other hand along the hose, and you're going to present it directly out in front of you, just like so. Here's the gas. You're going to reach over, grab your other regulator, clear it, and take a breath so that you have gas. As the receiver, I'm going to take that, put it in my mouth, and we're going to turn so that we're both parallel together. You're going to take your right hand and grab the meat of my arm. If I'm on the other side, you can take the left hand, but you're going to grab the back of my arm and the meat. And that way I've got control. If I'm the one with gas, I'm the one with control. And then I will swim with you. At this stage of the game, you guys are only being trained to be able to dive through restrictions that are wide enough for 2 people to pass. If you are in restriction more than that, you've gone beyond your limitation. But the good news is if that happens, the primary diver will fall behind the diver out of gas, and they will fall in line together. But for right now, I want you guys side by side, grabbing the meat of the arm. Let's see. That's gas sharing. You're going to need to run a simulated decompression plan. So we're going to build a plan that's going to have a simulated decompression in it. You're going to need to write it out, and you guys are going to need to run that actual plan for me. I'm going to need to see everybody launch a DSMB at some point. Most likely, you'll all get to run at least once. In some cases, you may get to run it 2 or 3 times. Let's see. Go through all the skills. Equipment assembly. For deco procedures, that is all the skills that is required for deco procedures. Let's see. Let me get down to extended range. For those continuing to the next level of extended range, I will need to see the estrials. I will need to see you turn your light on and off. I will need to see really good neutral buoyancy and hover in trim, out of gas, stage removal and replace. We will add, I need to see a flutter kick and a modified flutter kick. That's pretty basic stuff, but I need to see a frog, or should I say a frog and a modified frog. I need to see a helicopter, and I need to see a reverse frog. So I need to see you be able to back up, go forward, and turn a circle. Everybody understand what a helicopter turn is? In case you don't, a helicopter turn, you're in frog, and it means you just kick 1 foot. And if you just kick 1 foot, you will helicopter. That's all a helicopter is. A modified frog is just your ankles. A full frog is full ankles, and I'll need to see a backup. So, David, I would encourage you not wearing your split fins.
Those are... All right, we'll see if the other ones will fit over the dry suit boots.
I've got a set of RK3s that should fit
okay.
as well.
You said that, and I immediately went, oh, crap. So I'm glad you did too.
We also need to see an unconscious diver scenario, both at the surface and at depth. Let's see.
For the out of gas, is that out of gas on one side, or is that out of gas share with a buddy?
I want to see it share with a buddy.
Okay.
That is a great question, though. Sage removal place, ester oils, going through all the dives to make sure I got them all. Frog kick, reverse, SMB deployment. Let's see. This is an odd one. Take your instructor to lunch and buy him tacos. That's a new thing for SSI. Oh, I'm sorry. Just flutter kick, record depth, run. Obviously, we're going to be running a decompression plan on every single dive. Deploy SMB. Let's see, unconscious diver again.
How does unconscious diver work, Ben, with the deco?
That is a great question. Thanks for asking, Josh. And it's going to work slightly different on every single one, but it's going to be very much like we've talked about in stress and rescue. With side mounts, you're going to come behind, and you're going to make sure that you're getting their attention if they're completely out of gas, and we're going to make sure that their regulator is in their mouth, and then we're going to find their SMB, and we're going to control their ascent with their SMB through the process.
Their SMB or their BCD?
I'm sorry, buoyancy compensator, BC. I'm sorry. I'm having a brain aneurysm. It's a half hour past my bedtime.
I haven't done that one.
So we're going to use their SMB. So we're going to reach over and we're going to slowly use their SMB and get them to the surface by controlling and keeping their regulator in their mouth. And knowing how to dump their BC and how to inflate their BC.
But what do you do with your deco commitment?
That's the trick that you have to figure out through the process is, are we in a situation where I can successfully get them to a decompression, or do I need to get them to the surface now? So there's no good or easy answer on that. And it's something that we will discuss on site, and we'll talk more about that on site.
Okay.
And this will be an unconscious diver at depth then?
Yep.
Okay.
Other skills we're going to talk about and possibly practice, laying a static line, how to use that and how to follow it. What happens in entanglement? Stage removal and replace while swimming. Remove and replace backup equipment. Stage cylinder exchange. I may ask you guys to, you too, switch deco. And it's just about being comfortable. We will go through and you guys will learn the joy of the boom drill as well as we go through this. So I will come to one of you and I'll go, you, boom, and I'll show you left side. If something happened to your left side, what do you do? All of a sudden you have a catastrophic gas failure happening on your left side. What do you do? So Mike, if all of a sudden your left cylinder that you're breathing on had a gas, you notice that all of a sudden you've got a massive cut in the regulator, or your first stage is free flow, is frozen open. What do you do?
Yeah. I turn it off.
Yeah, turn it off. But now here's a question for you. Is that an unusable cylinder?
No, you can still breathe from it.
How?
You can, like, put it halfway in and breathe that way. If it's
but you just turn it off.
Well, if you need to, like, you turned it off, but if you've got another cylinder and you have deco commitments, you could actually still breathe from it, but I wouldn't want to do that the whole time.
Could you float the valve? Just sit there and manually open the tank valve?
Exactly. You can feather. It's called feathering. So that's the skill we're going to go through. And it's called feathering the valve.
Would you do that if you had a backup though? Or would you just?
You can, but what happens if you don't have enough gas on your other side, or there's a concern that you may not have enough gas to get through the whole dive without that cylinder?
Yep.
So would it be to your advantage to feather that gas and utilize that gas first, because the other gas is a known entity?
It depends on how much you had per side, right?
Exactly. Right. So a good example was I talked to you guys about the dive where I didn't know what was in my right tank, but I knew what was in my left tank. So I breathed the right tank first. So if I had been a good distance from the surface and I was going to have to come up for a deco, what I'd probably do is I'd probably feather that gas first. And it's simple enough. I've got that regulator in my mouth, off, breathe it down to 0, up, off, because there's about 2 breaths in a 32-inch line. So I can pressurize that line. I can get 2 breaths, turn it back off, get those 2 breaths, turn it back on, and get 2 more breaths. I can feather a tank for quite a while. And that saves my other tank for more need. So I know what's in the other tank. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to feather the tank with me. So I'm going to get rid of the unknown entity first, and then I'll go to the known entity. All the while, I'm going to be heading towards the surface because I've had a gas failure. But we're absolutely going to go through a valve feathering. Absolutely. Other things we're going to go through, we're going to check what happens if we have failed buoyancy in our dry suit.
Like a flooded dry suit or something, or
like a flooded dry suit. What happens if that? So we're going to simulate that. And the way we're going to simulate that is we're going to figure out how to use an SMB or a lift bag for a secondary lift source. I have 2 lift bags. I'm happy to share those out, but you guys should all have 2 SMBs as well. How much buoyancy is there in a 6-foot SMB?
2 cubic feet.
Mm-hmm. And 2 cubic feet is about how much lift?
16 pounds.
Mm-hmm. How much lift does the average BC have?
35.
Well, yours does, but the average is 20. The K2 is 25, but it. So 16 pounds of lift is quite a bit, right? So I want you guys to figure out how much lift and can you actually lift with an SMB. Free flowing regulator we already talked about. Primary mask failure. Are all you guys going to have a spare mask?
I am.
Nope.
I will.
You should have a spare mask, especially if you're going to be tech diving, because at some point, I guarantee this will happen. I will ask you this, and I'll expect you to switch to another mask that's somewhere else.
I'm going to switch with Josh.
With my prescription?
Yeah, it's going to be real fun.
Perfect.
Beggars can't be choosers.
So you guys will learn about the magic of the boom drill. And then we're going to do a full thinking shutdown fault finding. So I'm going to tell you boom drill, and you're going to need to figure out where, and I'll point dead center to you, boom, and you're going to need to figure that out. Which means you're basically going to do a what drill?
An S drill.
An S drill, absolutely. Let's see. That's and that's pretty much it. So fair amount of skills to go through. A lot of fun. A lot of fun for me. I'm not sure for you, but there'll be some other things that will magically happen. And I'm not going to tell you this, but there's a high likelihood that more than one drill may happen at the same time. So figure it out. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
All righty. What did you guys learn tonight? Anything good?
I learned that your favorite thing to do is be a gremlin. Be prepared for that, hopefully.
Well, I want you guys to have some problem-solving skills through this process, and the only way I can give you problem-solving skills is to give you problems to practice with. What else did you learn? Anything good?
I learned about feathering.
Okay. Anybody else?
I need to get a
Yeah.
side mount.
Once you get into side mounts, you can do decompression diving or extended range. I'm not decompression, but extended range diving. So, but Josh,
I say we just clip an aluminum 80 to one side and a Deco 40 to your other, and just have you be all sorts of cattywampus.
I don't know how to feel about that. My
It can be
spidey
fun.
all right. Does anybody want to see day one dive plan?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, I believe these are the correct ones. I'm going to take a look. Yep. Let's see.
For the Bear Lake class, most of those guys had flippable slates. Are we going to need those?
You are.
Okay.
You guys are lucky. I have one extra set of wrist slates that I will be willing to lend if you needed it. You should have your own slates. And I've got one tab slate extra as well if it's needed, but you will want your own wrist slates. So day one, equipment required. You're going to need an S&B, two are preferred. A reel and spool, 2 are preferred, 150-foot length. You need to have minimum length.
Is that
as you're deco diving, your length of your spool. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. The rule of thumb when it comes to spools or reels is that it should be 1.5 times the length of your deepest dive. In our case, you're going to need a minimum 150, but if we're doing a 120-foot dive, it should be 180 feet. You will need a light. 2 are going to be preferred. You're going to need a deco bottle, proper exposure requirement. A bottom gas is going to be 20. You can run your back gas at 21 to 40%. Your deco percent gas should be up to 40%. You're going to need a diving computer capable of technical mode with gradient factors. 2 diving computers are preferred. A cutting tool, a spare mask. Primary tank must be a minimum of 72, and your deco bottle must be a minimum of 30. So day one dive is going to be a simulated deco only, and we're going to be using 2550 as our gradient factor. So day one dive is going to be 60 feet for 22 minutes. Theoretical depth at that altitude is going to be 73 feet. Maximum depth that we can do is 30 feet. So if you guys would...
30 meters?
30 meters is our maximum depth. 99 feet is our maximum depth. We're going to go to 60 feet, and we're going to have lots and lots of fun. So what I need you guys to do is get out your little pencils and pens and write this down. 60 feet for 22 minutes with a gradient factor of 2550. That is going to be dive 1.
Can you say that again, Ben?
2550 is your gradient factor. We're going to do 60 feet for 22 minutes. Dive 1. Now, as we're planning this out, how important do you guys think a contingency plan might be?
Very.
Very, absolutely. So I need you guys to plan these dives out as you pull the software. And we're going to have a much deeper dive planning software meeting. But I'd like you guys to download the software and start playing with it. With these gradient factors and these times and depths, 2550, 60 feet, 22 minutes. But as you plan these out, I'm going to encourage you that you need to plan out a 5+5. Dive number 1 should be at. Dive number 2 should be 5 feet deeper. I'm sorry, 5 minutes longer, as I was. And dive number 3 should be 5 minutes longer, 5 feet deeper. I apologize. My brain is starting to turn off. I feel like I'm losing my voice.
So you said dive 2 was 5 minutes longer, and then dive 3 was 5 minutes plus 5 feet.
Yep. Exactly. Now, pro tip for you. I'll even cheat for you guys a little bit. Always plan your contingency dive first, because if you can't do your contingency dive, can you do your primary dive?
No.
No, not at all. So that's dive 1 that I need you guys to plan and play with. We're going to go into this a lot deeper, but I also want you guys to plan out your gas calculations on this.
Cool.
Okay.
On the reels that need to be 150 feet, do you need to have 2 that are 150 feet?
Yes,
I've got
you
one
should.
that's like 250, and then there's like 100 that I have, and a 50. But
You want both reels to be 1.5 times the depth of your deepest dive.
got it. And then I'm assuming you have those at the shop if we need to grab an extra one,
We do.
or the slates. Okay.
So dive 1 is going to be 60 feet for 22 minutes. Now, these are not going to the actual dives. I'm going to give you guys actual dives, but this is your play dives that we're going to play with. Dive 2, day 1, is going to be 80 feet for 19 minutes. Again, 2550 is going to be your maximum operating depth, but we're going to plan an 80-foot dive for 19 minutes, 2550. Please plan your gas accordingly, and please play with this in your dive planning software. We're actually going to go through and we're going to play with these in the dive planning software, and we're going to do them together, and we'll actually do the gas planning, and I will be happy to, after we do our manual gas. I want you guys to do the gas by hand, but after I will actually, after we do this on our next class, I will actually send you my spreadsheet. I'll show you how to use the spreadsheet. I've been threatening to let you guys use my spreadsheet for a while. I've got a very nice spreadsheet. All right. Any questions, guys?
Do we need to plan surface for the spin?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do we need to plan surface interval for these?
Yes, you do. 2 hours.
Oh, 2 hours. Okay.
Yep. I've got us down for class tomorrow. It's from 6 to 9. If that works for everybody.
What time is it there
Yep.
right now? Is it?
It is 9:30, 9:21. Sorry.
Okay. That'd be 7 to.
So a little later for you. Thanks, Mike, by the way, for being flexible.
Yeah, I can do it tomorrow, 6 to 9. Will you forward me the invite to that, Ben?
I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
I thought I had, but let me.
Yeah, I think I saw it already go out.
I got today's invite. I don't have one for tomorrow. I was kind of a last minute ad.
Okay, that's why. Let's see. Josh, Aaron, Chase, Mike, send. There you go. Just sent.
Thank you.
Easy enough. So that's been sent. So play with those. I just give you some stuff to play with, and we'll talk about them more in depth tomorrow. And I'll actually build out our dive plans for Saturday. We're going to be doing 2 dives on Saturday, 2 dives on Sunday this coming week.
Okay. Again, I got to see what my stress and rescue class schedule looks like. So
you may not. I get that you may not be able to join us, and that's fine. Not a worry at all. The requirements. Let me pull up the actual requirements for these. Golly, come on. Just so you guys are aware of what is required. Take me a second to pull up. I like to read the requirements instead of guessing at them. All right. Now, Mike, I'm guessing you have the SSI app, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You should be able to do all your homework in there. Please just make sure you have a headshot in there as well. After you do all your homework, make sure you go into the sync settings and sync. If you're doing them on the app, make sure you sync all your lessons.
Okay.
The app is notorious for not syncing. All right. Extended range. Open circuit. Extended range. I'm just pulling up the actual standards so I can read them to you and make sure that you guys have a clear understanding. All right. All right. Total time required for open range. 3-4 minutes. Where'd it go? I'm just trying to find it now. Take me just a moment. All right. Dives 1 and 2 have to be under 30 meters. Dives 3 and 4 have to be between 30 and 40 meters. And dives 5 and 6 have to be between 30 and 45 meters with at least one dive to 40 meters for extended range. Okay. Let's see. The minimum cumulative time for the dives, that's not it. I just lost it. Hey, what I see that? Oh, here we go. The total combined time for open water training dives 1 through 4 must be a minimum of 2 hours. So we have to end all 4 of those dives with at least 2 hours, and we will. Each dive will be about a half hour long. Now, dives 5 and 6 are our big dog dives. We have to have a minimum of 90 minutes between those 2 dives. So they will need to be at least 45 minutes long. And one of our dives has to be to 40 meters, to a depth of 40 meters. Now, good news is we get to calculate and use altitude adjusted times. So I will get you guys down to about 112 to 115 feet, possibly 120 feet. So, and with altitude correction, it'll end up, if we get to 120 feet at altitude here, it will be equal to 147 foot dive. So be aware. So that's what I'm looking for is 2 hours out of the first 4 dives, hour and a half out of the last 2 dives, with the last 4 dives being past 30 meters or 100 feet. And one of those dives will be to 40 meters. So that's my requirements. I like to set the expectation pretty clearly. Any questions on that? And Chase, for you work at a little bit different standard. Give me a second. I'll pull up your standards. Scuba, give me a second here. My computer's running stupid slow today. It's got to be that mesh thing that Josh made me get.
It's the
I
reaction.
didn't make you get it, but you haven't
But
disconnected.
you haven't cut out, right?
Say again. I haven't cut out. That is definitely a plus. It's working. Let's see. Diving pool.
We just need to prioritize traffic for StreamYard so it shuts all the rest of your internet down and puts you on priority traffic.
Something. Let's see. Okay. Chase, for you, this will give you the ability to dive to 40 meters with accelerated deco blends up to 40% with the maximum total decompression time of 15 minutes of decompression. So you'll be able to get up to 15 minutes of accumulated deco time, which, by the way, that's up. It used to be 5 minutes. So they increased that for you. So good news.
Okay.
Let's see. Depth limitations, minimum supervision. Let's see. Requirements for completion. Here we go. You need to complete at least 3 open water training dives. Let's see. Dive 1 is in no decompression limits, but using a simulated dive plan with simulated decompression. Dives 2 and 3 can be actual decompression training dives, and the total time for all required decompression stops on back gas profile must not exceed 15 minutes per dive. You may carry up to 40%. Let's see. And I didn't think they did, but let's see. There is no cumulative time required. So you have to complete 3 dives up to 40 feet.
Okay.
And let's see. There we go. Maximum depth on dive 1 is 40 meters. At least 1 dive must be to a depth of at least 30 meters.
Okay.
So your maximum depth is 40 meters, and there is no minimum depth, and your 1 dive has to be past 100 feet.
Okay.
But you have to do simulated deco on at least 2 dives.
Okay.
Easy enough.
Yep.
Yours is super simple. And guys, it's pretty much what you guys are going to be doing on dives 1 through 3 as well. Is you'll be doing simulated deco. You'll be doing exactly that. So easy enough. Dives 5 and 6 are the big dog dives where we're going to be in actual deco. If you're continuing into XR, and you will be using actual decompression blends, and we will our grading factor on dives 5 and 6 will be 40-70. So you'll be closer to real decompression or real grading factors, but you'll still not be quite there.
Okay.
My encouragement, my suggestion for deco or grading factor is 50-80 or 50-85. So, any questions?
Stop.
Joshua?
When you say real decompression, you're talking like 60%.
What do you mean 16%?
No, 60% gas.
No, the maximum you guys can use during training is 40%.
Is 40. Okay.
At the end of the class, you will be certified to use up to 100%.
Okay.
But during class, the maximum nitrox you'll be using is 40%.
Because that's what we're currently certified for.
Correct. But at the end of it, you'll be certified for up to 100%. Yeah. Jace, what questions do you have?
I don't think I have any questions. I'll probably want to talk to you over the Astral a little bit. That's not familiar to me yet. I haven't done anything with a pony bottle, so I might jump in the pool.
On Thursday, I'm gonna grab a pony bottle and strap it to you during open water.
I think that'd be great. I'd appreciate that.
Oh no, I'd already planned on that. It's required that I have to put you in the pool with a pony bottle for a little while. There's times I make plans for you guys that you guys don't know, like training sessions. I know you're going to be there Thursday, so my plan was just to throw a pony bottle on you and call that at my pool session. So I was familiarizing you with it.
Perfect.
So, and then what?
If you want to turn off your reactions, go to the top bar. See the little green icon with a camera on it.
Green icon with a camera on it.
Yeah, scroll your mouse up to the top of the bar, the very top of your computer.
Okay.
You should see a little green icon that's got a video camera on it.
Negative. I've got display link. I've got Sophos. Let's see.
I'll help you turn it off later on. These are those automatic reactions.
Gotcha. Now you got me curious. Okay, we'll find it later. Anyway, I appreciate it. David, what questions do you have?
I was fortunate enough to talk to you today, so I think I'm pretty well covered.
Mike, what questions do you have? You had a bunch of questions. I don't think I answered all your questions. I only answered one of the emails.
Yeah, I think I've been peppering you enough with those.
Not a worry. We'll plan on around noon on Friday of being in the pool. Plan on noon to about 1 we'll be in side mount setup. And then from 1 to 5 we'll be in pool doing our magic.
All right. Looking forward to it.
We're going to stack little things on big things and stack them big things onto little things and then little things onto big things and then big things onto little things. So we'll have lots of fun with that. And then we're going to take some tanks off. We're going to do some estrals. My whole goal is to get you as spun up as I humanly possibly can so that you'll be taking on the first 4 dives. And then I need you to, before you do dives 5 and 6, I need you to spend some pool time doing your thing. Because dives 5 and 6 are no joke dives. So they definitely, I want you to have some experience. So
looking forward to that.
Josh, I feel comfortable with you, but I still want to see some practice time out of you. If you got time Friday, come out and practice on Friday.
Me and David may be in the water on Friday.
Cool. And then David, I need to see lots more time out of you.
Which is why we're gonna dive on Friday.
Yep. I just 2 sessions does not a twin set diver make. Just saying.
I did 3 today.
You did 1 today that was long. So I'm going to end it here, but